My stepmom hid her own $28,000 purse to frame me for theft. When Dad discovered the truth, he begged me not to sue, but I pressed charges anyway. So, for perspective, I, a 24-year-old female, graduated from college about a month ago and have been living with my father and stepmother. This is only a temporary arrangement, and my father understands that I dislike my stepmother and have no desire to live with her indefinitely. My stepmother, Claudia Moreau, doesn't like me either, so this works for us. My original mother died when I was 10 years old, and when I was about 18, my father began dating Claudia. By the time I was 21, they had married. She had never liked me very much. I'm not sure what kind of person in their early 30s decides to detest a teenager for no apparent reason, but Claudia did. Even though she was considerably older than me and had no reason to resent me, she seemed to get a strange vibe about me from the start. I attempted to be pleasant to her, but when I realized that my efforts were not being returned or appreciated, I stopped and began ignoring her. We lived in the same house until I left for college, and it was unpleasant since she was constantly seeking for ways to pick on me. So I wasn't thrilled to be returning to stay here, but until I get a job and can afford rent, I'll have to do this. I had accepted it, but Claudia appeared to have deteriorated significantly over the last month. During my undergraduate years, I would periodically return home for vacations or weekends, but just for a few days. During that time she was pleasant because we generally ignored each other, but I guess she realizes right now that I'm not just here for a few days, and for some reason, she finds that difficult to deal with. So, over the past few weeks, ever since I came back in, she has made it her mission to get on my nerves. We've been fighting and bickering non-stop. And the odd thing is that whenever my father returns home, she puts on an act of being the best stepmother ever. So I know there's no point in telling my dad about any of this because he'll probably think I'm insane. I don't want to be petty and give her satisfaction, so I've been silent about it, but then she did something completely insane, and I don't think I can move on from that. So, I filed charges against her, and now my father claims that I was the one who provoked her, so I shouldn't be taking this so seriously. I'm not sure how to feel right now. Basically around 6 days ago, we got into a dispute about something minor. My father was at work, and I was applying for jobs online, so I was busy in the morning. Claudia barged into my room while I was filling out an application and began ranting at me about how much laundry she had to do as a result of my actions. She told me it was too much work and she wanted me to do my own washing from now on. I happened to roll my eyes before promising her that I would, and she decided to take that and spin it into something major. She told me that this was her house, and I couldn't act like way around her. And I informed her that this was my father's house, and she had done nothing in her entire life to deserve to be here but find the richest guy she could and marry him so she could sit at home and do nothing. She was being petty, and I was reacting in the same way, and things got really ugly. After a while she left, and I assumed it was finished. But that evening, when my father returned home, she began yelling about how one of her brand new designer bags, worth $28,000, had gone missing and accused me of theft. She told me that I didn't have a job yet, but she was confident that I had done something. Instead of defending me, my father took her side in this, and suggested that since I hadn't taken anything, I should be supportive of her rather than defensive. It was quite frustrating, and after a few minutes of yelling at each other, she simply decided to call the authorities on me. It was terrible for me, but the entire house was searched, including my room and person. Everything was flipped upside down, but nothing could be found, therefore it was eventually reported stolen. But I was left off the hook because I clearly did not have it in my possession, and there was no evidence to suggest otherwise. I decided to leave that night since I felt so ashamed. Since then, I have been staying with a buddy. I didn't speak with my father, and he didn't try to stop me as I was going, so I knew what his priorities were. But then, 3 days ago, he chose to contact me in tears and tell me that Claudia had admitted that she had taken the bag with her and kept it at a friend's house a few days earlier, with the intention of framing me. She had told him the truth after he had caught her on the phone with the aforementioned buddy, where they were discussing what had transpired the previous day, and he had supposedly overheard her saying how relieved she was that I had finally left. He had planned to surprise her by returning home early from work, but instead he received the shock of his life. He informed me that he was deeply sorry, and that he and Claudia were not communicating at the time, but he wanted to make up by inviting me back home and apologizing in person. But I told him there was no way I was returning so soon, especially since Claudia was gone. I also told him that now that he had told me the truth, I would denounce her and file charges against her for attempting to frame me. I was upset, but he attempted to calm me down, saying that he wanted to deal with this as a family, and that pressing charges against her would just make things worse to the point of no repair. That was not what he wanted. He wanted us to get along, so he basically begged me not to file charges. But I'm going ahead because what she did was more than just petty, it was dangerous, and I can't believe she would go to such lengths to get me out of the house. Something is seriously wrong with that woman. And if my father can't see this and he still expects us to get along and work things out, there's something wrong with him as well. The only reason I'm having second thoughts is that the friend I'm staying with has told me that if I do this, I might as well say goodbye to any chance of reconciling with my father in the future, because it's clear that he loves Claudia for whatever reason, and if I press charges against her, he'll probably never forgive me, and I'll lose him forever. She also reminded me that my father had sacrificed a lot for me in the past because, when my mother died, he had essentially taken care of me alone, with no assistance from anybody else in the family. Nobody was willing to aid us, whether financially or emotionally. He had to make a lot of sacrifices, and she simply wanted me to consider that before I did anything. So that's why I'm not sure what I want to do. Even though I am confident that there is nothing wrong with me filing charges against Claudia, I am concerned about my father. So Elena, if I decide to file charges against my stepmother for attempting to frame me. Okay, because so many people have asked, I didn't mention it because I didn't think it was significant, but my father is approximately 50, and Claudia is 39 right now. They had an 11-year age difference, and Claudia used to work when she first met my father, but she stopped after they married. So that is why I made the comment about her, in my post. And I don't believe I said anything incorrect because I know exactly the type of lady she is. Even though my father cannot see it, I can, and if I had known how she would turn out after marriage, I would have told him from the start. Update 1. Hey folks, I've decided to bring charges against Claudia. Whatever relationship I had with my father, I cannot let that stand in the way of what needs to be done. I respect him, adore him and appreciate everything he's done for me, but it doesn't mean I'll let Claudia get away with it because what she did was abnormal. And I hope that someday he will be able to understand my perspective. And, honestly, I believe he should have anticipated this, because he was the one who phoned me and told me the truth. If he didn't want me to go against her, he shouldn't have called and told me anything. I believe that is why he did not want me to press charges since he knew he was the one who told me, and he would feel terrible if something went wrong. But now it is too late. Claudia's situation is going to deteriorate, and I'm not going to let it go. I've previously spoken with a few pals, and they recommended a decent lawyer. It will cost me, but I believe it will be worth it. I do have some money that my mother left me. I didn't want to dig into it because it was my savings, and I wanted to set it aside for future emergencies or whatever, but I'm already in talks with a company, and I'll start next month if all goes well. They pay generously, and I believe it is worth taking the risk, because Claudia has to learn a lesson and see that what she did was wrong. So I'm suing her for malicious prosecution, and she'll only have to pay me damages if I win. Or she can go the other way and resolve this outside of court, which I am also willing to do, but all I want is for her to know she has lost. Maybe a lot of people may find this petty and vengeful, but I don't mind. This is vital to me, and I will go ahead and accomplish it nonetheless. Update 2. Okay. So, I haven't spoken to my father in 3 weeks. He kept attempting to contact me. He contacted me several times, but I did not react because I knew I was going against his wishes, and I did not want to fight with him. And I knew that if I spoke to him he would try to persuade me otherwise, which I didn't want either. So I said nothing at all. I followed through with the judicial proceedings. I met with the lawyer and made all of the necessary preparations, and Claudia was ultimately served 3 days ago. That evening, my father started messaging me again. Despite the fact that he had chosen to remain silent for the past few days since I was plainly not responding and was unwilling to speak with him. But once Claudia was served, it didn't matter. He began bombarding my phone with messages and phone calls, telling me that he was really unhappy, that this was not how he wanted me to handle things, and that it was insane that I wasn't even considering his point of view. He told me I was being really selfish and petty, which was not how he raised me. To that, I ultimately responded by telling him that he had done a fine job raising me, but it was now up to me to decide whether I wanted to deal with things vindictively, or with forgiveness or whatever. And I had decided not to forgive Claudia, and I had a clear explanation for it. She was not sorry. So, how could I forgive someone who did not apologize for whatever they had done? It did not make sense. So I had to go the opposite way. And I refused to apologize because, given how he raised me, he had trained me not to accept garbage from anyone. So he can't be furious because I'm behaving precisely how he instructed me. I can't behave according to his convenience, and he needs to understand that. I may be his daughter, and I am grateful for everything he has done for me, but I am also my own person, and he must allow me to be myself. Furthermore, if he genuinely believes that I can forgive Claudia for what she did, he is gravely incorrect. She doesn't deserve my forgiveness, she did not even ask for it, And it's not like she hasn't had the time or opportunity in the last several days to apologize to me and try to make things right. She had plenty of time, but she opted to remain silent since she knew my father would take her side in this. Even though he was angry, he continued to support her, which was even more heartbreaking for me. Because if he truly wanted matters to be resolved peacefully without the need for attorneys, he could have easily spoken with her as well. In fact, I believe that is exactly what should have happened. This was entirely her fault. He knew it. He had mentioned it to me personally. And if he hadn't unintentionally overheard her chat with her buddy, he probably wouldn't have known the truth because she wouldn't have told him on her own. She needed to be caught, and I'm grateful that she was caught so quickly. I was actually fortunate that she was careless enough to be loud enough on the phone that my father overheard her, because else he would not have believed that I was innocent, and I would have been investigated without cause. She did all of this to get me out of their lives, and he still expects me to forgive her, go on, and pretend nothing happened. That doesn't seem fair to me, and it also doesn't make sense. Because if this had occurred to him, he would not have behaved in the way he expects me to. And most significantly, if he wanted things to be resolved, he should have spoken with her. He should have asked her to apologize to me, and I might have considered forgiving her. But he didn't do that. He simply kept trying to pressure me into letting it go, as if this was somehow my fault, which makes no sense to me. He's being incredibly biased, and I can tell his priorities have moved. I was once his priority, but not anymore. Right now, everything revolves around Claudia, and all he wants is to please her and know what is best for her. He doesn't care what I'm going through, and it's clear right now. It's hurtful, and I want him to understand. So I texted him, told him everything, and he didn't even respond. I guess he didn't have much to say in his own defense because everything I stated was accurate, and he was aware of it. He'd be a fool not to do so. Anyway, I said what I had to say. Even after this, if he doesn't grasp what I'm saying, that's not my concern. I will not back down. I know I'm doing the right thing, and Claudia deserves this. And I hope she gets in a lot of problems for this because what she did to me was not fair. It was crazy, and I'm so glad she got caught when she did. Update 3. Hello everyone. I apologize for not updating for such a long period, but I acquired a job and became quite busy. I've recently moved into my own apartment, and it feels fantastic. I've been producing my own money and spending it on myself, which feels incredibly exhilarating. I don't know how to describe it. It's just really new and feels fantastic. Anyway, I know people are probably reading because they want to know what occurred between me, my father, and Claudia. So I filed the complaint, but she hired a lawyer within a few days and stated that she wanted to reach an out-of-court settlement. As much as I wanted to draw things out and cause a lot of trouble for my father and Claudia, I also had financial limits, so if she just handed it to me, I was willing to accept the settlement. Long story short, I made $33,000 off of this, which is $5,000 more than the bag cost. And she received community service because at the end of the day, even if I reached an agreement with her, she filed a false complaint. Fortunately, because it was her sole offense, she was let off the hook easy, and I would argue she was let off the hook with no consequences, except from the community service she had to complete, because I believe the money came from my father's finances, not her own. I don't think she has that much money. Even the bag was a birthday gift from my father. But in the end, I got something out of it, which was my major motivation. Anyway, since this episode occurred a few months ago, my father and I have not spoken. I haven't blocked him, and he hasn't blocked me, so he can contact me, as can I, but we don't want to. The last message I gave him was what I said in my previous update, in which I basically called him out on his behavior, and he had no explanation for it, so he simply did not answer. Until now, he has not bothered. It's okay, I guess. I don't really have much to say about this. It's quiet, but I do miss my father a lot, since even when he married Claudia and I moved away for college, we stayed in touch, and he has been such a vital part of my life for so long, that it feels strange to accept that things will never be the same again. Even if we are able to reconcile in the future, I know that things will never be the same again, which feels strange and wrong. Update 4. Hello everyone. It's been 1.5 years since I last spoke to my father. I am not sure what he has been up to. The only time I hear of him is at family gatherings. He doesn't go to those, so I haven't seen him in a long time. It is not unexpected that he has separated himself from everyone else, given that he was never particularly connected to anyone in the family to begin with. I merely keep up appearances for the sake of being courteous. Otherwise, I'm not very connected to these people. However, over the last year, I've made an effort to attend most family gatherings since, after cutting connections with my father, I've felt a little lonely at times, and there's only so much you can do with your friends or coworkers. According to what I know, he and Claudia are doing well, and they are currently considering adoption. I learned about this about a week ago at one of my cousin's weddings, and it astonished me. I had no idea what to make of it, and after a long time, I ended up crying about my connection with my father that night when I returned home from the wedding. I suppose it makes sense. They want to get on with their lives, but at some point, I guess I just wanted my father to choose me, his daughter, over Claudia. But as petty as it may sound, I sincerely hope that they do not get to adopt anyone. Claudia is obviously unfit to be a mother, and I'm not sure how my father agreed to attempt to adopt a child with her of all people, especially given what she did to me. She was clearly insecure about me. That's why she wanted to cut me out of my father's life entirely. That is why she went to such lengths. Even after all of this, he chose to forgive her and work things out with her rather than try to understand my stance. I'll be honest, thinking about my father makes me furious and upset, which is why I purposefully avoid thinking about him. But it does not help. It does not change the realities, and it still hurts occasionally. This news threw me off last week, but now that it's been a few days, I'm very certain they won't be able to. I'm not sure what it is. I just have a good feeling and know it won't work out for them. I'm not saying I don't wish my father well. It's just that I am being practical. Sooner or later, he will understand how hollow his connection with Claudia is, and what a huge mistake he made. And by then, it will be too late to mend his relationships with everyone else. He made his decisions and dug his grave. So whatever. Update 5. So, hello everyone, I didn't expect to be posting updates here after so long, yet here I am. A lot has changed in the last 4 years, and now I'm getting married. My fiancé and I have been dating for 4 years now. I had already been seeing him by the time I last put an update here. It began as a fling, but as time passed, we realized we genuinely loved each other, and I think it stayed. So yes, we have been living together for the past 2 years, and he recently proposed. It's been a week since then, and I recently shared it on all of my social media platforms. Obviously I was overjoyed, and I received numerous congratulations. My father was among those who complimented me and reached out after a long period. We hadn't spoken in about 5 years, so it felt strange. So I wasn't sure how to react. I did hear from a handful of relatives last year that he and Claudia had hit a tough period and were currently living separately. I also knew he had developed a drinking habit, which was not surprising given that my grandfather struggled with alcoholism in his later years. I just never anticipated my father to cave in, because he wasn't a big drinker. I wanted to reach out to him multiple times since I missed him so much. But then I'd remind myself of what transpired. I could never forget that he picked Claudia over me, therefore I never contacted him. This time he messaged me to congratulate me, and in the spirit of new beginnings, I replied to his message and thanked him, but that was all. I said nothing else. Then he responded again, saying that he had been planning to contact me for a while, and that for the past 5 years, he had only been thinking about how I was correct in all I had stated. He told me that he had been incredibly selfish, and he was now paying a high price. He explained that he and Claudia had split, and were now discussing divorce. Of course, he would have to pay alimony because she hadn't worked in a long time. And because she was unemployed, even if it was by choice, he would have to support her until she chose to remarry or gave it up for whatever reason. But, until then, he'll have to keep supporting her. He stated that relations between the two of them had become quite strained in recent years, and he had never been able to really forgive her for what she had done. And he couldn't forgive himself since he recognized it was all his fault. But by then, I had stopped speaking to him, and he was too ashamed to contact me. And then he told Claudia that he didn't want to adopt a baby with her because he felt she was attempting to replace me, and they ended up fighting over it, which is why they split up in the first place. He closed the message by congratulating me again, and apologizing for reaching out to me, and now looked like the perfect occasion for him to bestow his blessings on me for the future, while also asking for forgiveness for everything that had happened in the past. And to be honest, that message brought me to tears, so I paid him a visit in the evening. Lucas Meyer and I stopped there, and it was evident that he hadn't been doing well since the house was a little dirty, not as well kept as it had been in the past. He didn't appear to be particularly cheerful or healthy, but he was overjoyed to see me, and we broke down as soon as we hugged. We did not talk much about the past. We didn't talk about what we were going to do in the future, but we both agreed that we wanted a fresh start. It won't be easy. It will undoubtedly be difficult and uncomfortable, requiring a significant amount of effort. But as long as both of us are ready to put in the effort, I believe it will work. And with Claudia gone, I think it will be worthwhile. It took him a long time, but I'm glad he eventually came around. Now all I can do is hope that things will improve for both of us in the future. After months of searching, my brothers and I confronted our father about who attacked our sister, and what he revealed destroyed our family's future. My brother Ethan and I were Tom and Jerry as kids. Beef was visible. I'd attack him with a knife if he entered the kitchen. He'd smack my head with Martin's golf club if he caught me cleaning my teeth. We argued about everything. TV remote, first pizza slice. We even battled over who despised one another more. Fist bouts that left Ava crying and requiring ambulances. We hated each other until we started MMA in our late teens. We had no clue it would devastate our family. Our first spar, he knocked me unconscious. I handed him gloves that night and instructed him to wear them. We went to school with black eyes the next day. We became great friends after pushing one other to improve and going to the MMA gym together. I followed him. Messing with me was messing with him. Our black belts came 10 years later. We heard Jack's luggage buzzing while working out. He walked over and found 2 Ava missed calls on his phone. He opened his eyes wide. Ava never phoned twice unless someone died or was going to. He phoned back immediately. His countenance went from perplexed to horrified in seconds. We need to go now. He gathered his belongings and raced out, followed without asking. We raced to hospital. The whole journey, Ethan wouldn't tell me what Ava said. Just kept saying, "Hurry up." Unprepared for what I saw in her chamber. Ava was hospitalized with a fractured nose and purple puffy face. She looked like a car crash victim. Shaking, Liam questioned, "What happened?" Ava wept. "Someone broke into the house. 2 men beat me up." Jack's face erupted as I clasped Ava's hand. "The men didn't take anything," Ava said. "Not my purse, TV, nothing. It's like they broke in to hurt me." My thoughts raced. Someone would do that? And why? Ava read our minds then. "Maybe you can see who it was from the security video." She gestured to her jacket pocket phone. Because she was afraid about break-ins, Ava placed CCTV cameras in her home. Zane and I watched the security video on her phone. 2 masked guys picked her lock, entered and headed for her. Didn't check valuables. She was tackled and beaten repeatedly. The scene was so horrible we almost sobbed. They wore black all over. When one reached up, his neck was briefly exposed. There was a unique tattoo. I examined it in detail. Jack peered at me. "Wait, I know that tattoo." "What?" "That's Martin's friend, Luke. He has that exact tattoo on his neck." Jack's eyes popped out like before his matches. "Our mom was accused of adultery by Martin's co-worker 4 years ago because she wanted him. She showed him screenshots of mom's infidelity. He believed it without asking her. I recall his anger upon leaving. So hateful." "Do you think Martin did this?" I whispered. We sat silently because, "Do you think he had Luke attack Mom? Should we tell the cops?" Ryan's statement altered everything. "We're not going to the police." "What?" Ryan demanded. "They'll get a trial and 5 months probation." "Maybe. That's not real justice. We'll handle this ourselves." I nodded at Ava's injured face. "What do we do?" "We discover out who did it. Then we make it right." We investigated for 11 months. We inquired about Luke. We followed him and observed his conversations. Overall, we trained harder than ever. Ava was our target with every strike. Every hour tracked moved us closer to truth. Everything pointed to Luke as we dug. Martin's best pal. His co-workers observed a black clothing in his backpack the day Ava was attacked. He got a new automobile and paid off his mortgage. Martin used to pay for favors. Once we identified him, we knew what to do. Luke departed his strip club on Friday night. Waiting in the parking lot. We stepped forward as he left. While holding my baseball bat, I looked without speaking. Ethan knuckled. Luke examined our hands before looking at our faces. "Get in the car." Luke did. To Martin's residence we drove. We watched him too. We knew he was home alone. Martin answered the door upon our knock, and his expression was amazing. We pushed into the house past him. Luke tried to retreat, but we stopped him. "Tell us what you did to Ava," I say. Luke stumbled. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan hit Luke with 10 years of training and anger. Fell on the floor. "We have video. We saw your tattoo. We were separated by Martin." "Did you instruct him to do it?" I asked Martin. "Did Luke beat Ava?" "No." Martin worried. "I didn't do anything." Ryan confronted Martin. "Then who was the other person with you? Who else attacked our mom?" Martin cried. "I swear it wasn't me." "Then who?" Liam yelled. Martin sank into the wall. His voice cracked. It was my son. My other son from before I met your mother. You don't know about him. He's 32 inches. The room quieted. Martin has another son. Our kid killed our mother halfway. Ethan and I quietly nodded to each other to start business. I pulled Martin forward by the collar until our faces were inches away. His breath smells like anxiety and cheap whiskey. Ryan quickly jumps between us and the front door to stop Luke from fleeing. Martin shakes his hands as he says his other son's name is Aaron and that he's supported him for years without informing anybody. He says Martin told Aaron about Ava's possessions when he needed money. Bad lie makes my blood boil. Martin falls into the wall when I push him back. The house wasn't robbed, thus Ava's pocketbook, TV and jewels weren't taken. About harming her. Jack gently picks up my baseball bat from where I dropped it, letting Martin observe every step. Martin's eyes widen as he speaks quicker, giving us a town location and pleading not to hurt Aaron. He insists Aaron is a youngster who erred. I laugh bitterly and enraged because Aaron, 32, is older than us and battered our mother till she looked like raw flesh. As we go, I look back at Martin and Luke on the floor. If either contacts Aaron or the police before we're done, we'll finish tonight. Liam and I remain silent during the 20-minute journey to Aaron's. I hold the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles become white and the leather creaks. Jack's respiration grows heavier before matches as usual. I keep picturing Ava's broken nose and injured face as we cross a border we can't cross again. Martin's address leads to a rundown apartment complex with half the security lights broken and graffiti over the walls. Martin identified Aaron's third-floor window, so we park across the street. A shadow crosses the glass at midnight. Jack proposes we kidnap Aaron in public in the morning before he goes for work to avoid neighbors hearing and contacting the police. Everything in me wants to go up there and kick down his door. But Liam's right. We smartly tracked Luke and gathered evidence for 11 months. Rushing in angrily gets us caught, wounded, or worse. Drive to an all-night diner and get a corner booth. After the waitress gives us coffee, we write down what Martin told us about Aaron on napkins. Name, age, residence, and Martin's payment. My phone buzzes and displays Ava's name at 3 a.m. She seldom calls late, making me queasy. I hear her screaming and wondering where we are, stating she woke up from a nightmare about us getting injured. I lie and say we're at Ethan's flat eating pizza and watching movies. She doesn't seem to believe me, but she hangs up and warns us. At 6 a.m., we park at Aaron's building again. Aaron emerges at 6:30 in a brown delivery truck outfit with a corporate emblem, chest. Liam snaps phone shots of his license plate and vehicle logo. We follow him to a large warehouse on the outside of town and watch him clock in. Now we know his schedule and workplace. Aaron is tracked like Luke for the next week. He works 5 10-hour shifts a week, buys beer at the same convenience shop every night, and goes home. His apartment is always dark by 10 o'clock. We cannot see his girlfriend or roommate. Ethan finds Aaron's social media, and we spend hours browsing his images. Years ago, he and Martin were photographed at barbecues, baseball games, and family events. Martin never invited us to birthday celebrations where he smiles and hugs Aaron like he's proud. A secret existence Martin hid from us and Ava. The photographs make me ill because Martin picked this son over us. He bribed him to damage Ava and never suggested having another child during our childhood. Aaron posts about money issues and unaffordable child support. We learn more about why Martin chose him. Martin presumably offered Aaron enough money to fix his finances in exchange for frightening Ava. I browse Aaron's social media and find images of him at a young girl's birthday celebration 3 years ago. The post reads, "Best day with my princess." Dozens of responses praise his fatherhood. Upon seeing the snapshot, Liam zooms close on Aaron's face. He appears pleasant and regular, not like someone who would batter a lady half to death for money. But then Liam goes to postings from 6 months ago when Aaron complains about his ex-wife bringing him back to court for overdue child support. He writes that missing payments might cost him custody. A guy claims he owes over $18,000 and his earnings are garnished. 2 months before, he said he needed a miracle. Martin must have seen these messages and knew how to make Aaron comply. Thinking about how Martin used Aaron's love for his daughter to harm Ava makes me ill. Liam and I discuss our alternatives in his car outside Aaron's apartment building for 3 days. I suggest we should go to the police with all we know, show them the surveillance tape, tell them about Luke's new vehicle and paid-off mortgage, and explain Martin's history of paying for favors. Ethan always shakes his head and tells me that Martin would employ an expensive lawyer to destroy our inquiry. Luke will say the money came from somewhere and his tattoo is popular. Aaron will claim he was at work when Ava was attacked, and his employer may agree. Martin will cry in court about his sons framing him because they're furious over the unrealized divorce. Our surveillance images and videos will give the prosecutor evidence of an unlawful probe that breached privacy laws. We will lose all we worked on for 11 months, and those 3 will go free. Although Zane is correct, it makes me want to hit something. We need indisputable proof. Aaron must confess or Martin must be caught bribing him. I recommend we video Aaron admitting what he did, and Ethan's eyes light up like when he finds an opponent's vulnerability. We head to an electronics store and buy a pocket-sized voice recorder. We practice what to say to Aaron to get him talking at Jack's flat. Jack will show him surveillance footage and I'll tell him Martin paid him. We'll pretend we have proof to see if Aaron panics and explains. Approach him in public so he can't flee or fight back and be cool so he doesn't notice we're recording. We practice scenarios and reactions for hours until we get it right. We follow Aaron and discover his routine for 2 weeks. He frequents the East Side Bar Lies every Friday night. It's a dive with sticky floors and a rear corner pool table. Conversations blur due to dark illumination and loud music. Everyone there ignores others' business. It's ideal for our needs. We follow Aaron to Lies on the 3rd Friday and observe him order a beer and sit at the bar via the window. We wait in the car till he's relaxed after 3 drinks. The bartender's words make him giggle and lower his shoulders. We enter and slide into the booth across from him. Aaron looks at us, going from casual to confused. He glances at Liam and then at me, trying to figure out how he knows us. Recognition turns his face pallid. His bar stool scratches the floor as he rises up quickly. I lean forward and tell him to sit down because we want to talk about our mother. Aaron is debating whether to run away or listen to us as I speak calmly yet firmly. Slowly sitting down, he takes up his beer with shaky hands. Liam opens Ava's assault security footage on his phone. He lifts it up so Aaron can see the screen and zooms in on Aaron's mask slipping and revealing his face. Aaron widens his eyes and stammers that he's never watched that film, but his brow is sweating and his leg is jumping under the table. Liam focuses on Luke's tattoo and then Aaron's face. Leaning forward, I tell Aaron we know everything. Martin informed us he recruited Aaron and Luke. Luke confessed being there. Aaron opens his lips to deny, but he says nothing. His expression falls, and he stares down at his drink like he'll cry. Then he speaks quickly, rushing words. He adds, Dad told him Ava stole money during their separation, that she was keeping Martin away from his sons, that she deserved to be taught a lesson about respect. My little recorder is recording every word. Aaron says he merely wanted to terrify Ava, not injure her. Luke got carried away and kept hitting. He's making excuses and shifting blame, but he's admitting to participation. Aaron's voice cracks as I ask why. He claims Martin promised him $12,000 to catch up on child support and prevent his ex-wife from taking his kid forever. He claims he was desperate, and Martin made Ava sound like a nasty person who wrecked his family. My fists clench under the table, but I keep my voice quiet. I inquire further about preparing, breaking in, and what Martin told them. Aaron keeps replying because he thinks we know everything and cooperation could assist him. Aaron says Martin paid him half up front and half thereafter when Liam asks. He shows us his bank account on his phone to prove his honesty. His quivering hands almost drop the phone, but he pulls up his transaction history. His screen shows 2 $6,500 cash deposits. I photographed them. One is 5 days before Ava's attack, one 3 days after. It's perfect proof linking the payment to the timing. Aaron sobs and apologizes repeatedly. He claims that Martin made Ava seem like she had wrecked his life and deserved what occurred, that he needed the money so desperately and that his daughter was being removed. He begs us not to call the police because he'll lose his job, kid, and all he's fought for. He might have killed Ava with his thrashing, therefore I have no pity for him. As Liam inches forward, his voice becomes icy and definitive. He offers Aaron 2 options. Turn oneself into the police within 24 hours and confess, or we take the tape and evidence ourselves. Aaron becomes white and shakes his head rapidly, claiming he can't go to jail. His daughter requires him. His ex-wife won't see him again if he's arrested. He's pleading for another way to fix this. I get up and stare down at him, telling him he has until tomorrow night to decide, or we'll find him, and make sure he never sees his baby again. Anyway, we leave the bar without looking back. leaving Aaron with his hands over his face. I argue in hushes with Ethan in the parking lot outside my car. I think we should call the police now because giving Aaron time is dumb. Obviously he'll run. Liam disagrees, saying we should give him a chance to do the right thing and that turning himself in will appear better in court. I explain Liam Aaron is a coward who beat our mom for money. He won't suddenly become moral. We negotiate for 10 minutes before agreeing. We'll observe Aaron's flat tonight to prevent his disappearance. We'll give him till the deadline if he's there tomorrow. We park to Aaron's building to view his truck in his window. We alternate watching his apartment as the lights stay on beyond 2 a.m. After the lights go off at 3 a.m., we try to sleep in the car, with one of us watching his truck. Aaron's truck is still in the parking lot at 6 a.m. the next morning, and I wonder whether Liam was correct. Maybe Aaron will confess. Watching him go for work at 7:30 a.m. in his delivery outfit like usual. Jack thinks we should follow him to make sure he gets to work and not the highway. We follow his vehicle to the distribution center and see him park and enter. I advise Liam to go home and sleep, then see whether Aaron meets his word tonight. We crash at Marcus's and can't sleep because my mind keeps replaying Aaron's confession and wondering if we're making a big mistake. Jack's phone rings at midday, waking us up. Despite not knowing the number, Jack answers and speaks. The caller asks if we're looking for Aaron, and my stomach drops. One of his distribution center co-workers said Aaron phoned in ill this morning and begged him to inform us if we stopped by. The co-worker is baffled why Aaron would want him to convey a message to us, but we thank him and hang up quickly. Liam and I glance at one another and know what this entails. Aaron ran. We rush back to his apartment complex in the automobile. His truck is gone from the parking space. We knock on his door but nobody answers. As I kick the door in despair, Zane calls the distribution center back as Aaron's buddy to ask if anybody knows where he is. The caller claims Aaron called in ill for one day. He's probably still in town since he didn't resign. We drive around all day to see where Aaron could go. Before knocking on his ex-wife's door, we don't want to startle her because her car is there and Aaron's truck isn't. We drove to Martin's house and circled the neighborhood 3 times without finding Aaron's truck. Next, we wait outside Luke's place for an hour, but Aaron never arrives. By 6 p.m., we're out of ideas and I'm more upset we let him go. Cheap hotels along the highway are where someone might hide if they were preparing to run but hadn't gone, Liam says. Working south from the north end of town, we examine parking lots at every dilapidated hotel. Finally, Aaron's vehicle is parked outside the Highway Rest Motel, around 8 p.m. This shady place rents rooms by the hour. Ethan wants us to knock on doors until we discover his room, confront him again, and take him to the police. After playing games, I call Ava on my phone. I hear the TV when she responds on the second ring. I tell her we discovered the individuals who hurt her, have proof and a confession tape and will give everything over to the police tonight. Ava cries instantly, but differently. A blend of relief and terror. She asks us to be careful, let the judicial system handle it, and not do anything that will get us in trouble or injured. She says she can't lose us either. That she values safety over retribution. I assure her we'll do this correctly and head directly to the police station, even though part of me wants to take Aaron out of that hotel room and make him pay for what he did. We walk to the police station front desk after driving there. I request to talk with Detective Scott, who handled Ava's case, and the desk officer seems shocked but calls her. Detective Scott arrives in the foyer 20 minutes later, looking older and worn. As she walks us back to an interview room, she recognizes us and seems wary. The room is small with a metal table, terrible chairs, and a red-lit camera in the corner. Ethan and I sat down and organized everything we uncovered over 11 months. Our Luke images, Aaron's bank deposit screenshots, and Aaron's bar confession are shown to her. We discuss Martin's hidden son, Luke's new vehicle and paid-off mortgage, and our surveillance of them. We explain how surveillance footage linked Luke's tattoo to Martin's pal. Martin's confession led us to Aaron, and everything fit into a conspiracy image. Detective Scott has her arms crossed and becomes angrier as we chat. She's quiet for a while after we finish, then she says we did an unlawful investigation. She believes we may have ruined the case by confronting and intimidating suspects, and consent rules may prevent the tape from being shown in court. She asks if we attacked, threatened, or broke laws throughout our inquiry. My heart is hurting because we believed we were helping Ava obtain justice, but maybe we made things worse. We approached Luke and Martin at Martin's house, maybe scaring them, but we didn't injure anyone. Ethan says we just followed individuals in public and took images anybody might have taken. Detective Scott sighs and picks out a notepad, asking us to write comprehensive notes regarding every investigation stage. She wants to know everyone we followed, every proof we found, every conversation, and every place we went. She wants to know what we did so she can determine what elements of the case we saved, and what we wrecked. After 4 hours, my hand hurts from writing. We detail our Luke and Aaron surveillance, Martin's house encounter, and bar recording on page after page. Detective Scott always asks 3-paragraph questions when we believe we're done. We finish after midnight, and I'm fatigued and afraid we'll get jailed for stalking or harassment. Detective Scott gathers our statements and advises us to discuss next steps with the district attorney. She claims they'll be in touch and we shouldn't contact the suspects or investigate further. We drive home silently, and I'm not sure if we saved or damaged Ava's case. Detective Scott contacts me 2 days later to return to the station. Have a lawyer? She advises bringing one. Her voice says this isn't optional. More like a command. Ethan and I are frightened of being arrested for all we did. We can't afford a lawyer, so we turn up to the police the next morning trying not to worry. Detective Scott meets us in the lobby again, but this time she's with a young man in a suit who looks 30. He shakes our hands firmly after she introduces him as AITA Kramer from the district attorney's office. We accompany them to a larger conference room with a long table and comfy chairs than the interview room. AITA Kramer sits across from us and doesn't chat. He admits we made a mess by probing ourselves. That we may have ruined the case against our mom's attackers. However, he changes his attitude and claims that our evidence leads to a conspiracy to conduct assault, despite our poor tactics. Banking documents, pictures and surveillance video with Luke's tattoo have been examined. The tape may not be admissible, but everything else creates a strong case. He'll help us prosecute Martin, Aaron and Luke for what they did to Ava if we cooperate and cease doing anything ourselves. We logged bank deposits, then Kramer distributed images around the table from a folder. He said the money records were significant evidence since they indicated a clear payment trend before and after the incident. Aaron and Luke's images illuminated their love. He looked serious as he tapped the bar's recording device. He said filming someone without their consent may be illegal in court, depending on state law. The defense might claim it was obtained unlawfully and toss it out. That recording showed Aaron admitting everything, which made me queasy. Kramer must have seen my reaction because he swiftly added that the lawsuit might proceed without the tape. He would interview Luke and offer him a bargain in the coming hours. Luke might receive reduced charges or probation for testifying against Martin and Aaron. We let Luke go lightly because we wanted to construct the strongest case, Kramer told Zane. Luke's testimony might indicate Martin planned everything. Without it, Martin might say he knew nothing and Aaron acted alone. Detective Scott agreed and continued. This was standard procedure in conspiracy cases. You flipped the weakest link to get the bigger fish. I despised it but understood it. Detective Scott and 2 other police drove to the hotel where we traced Aaron that afternoon. Kramer delayed us at the station and observed from the parking lot window as suspects entered. We sat for 2 hours drinking awful coffee and chatting little. Aaron was in the back seat of the police cruiser when it arrived. Aaron ran as soon as the cops opened the door. He ran to the street, but Detective Scott had placed the 3rd cop there. He shouted about police harassment as they grappled him to the asphalt and cuffed him. Watching them shackle him and pass the window should have been gratifying. It took 11 months to track him. He was apprehended when we challenged and videotaped him. I felt empty instead. Not the justice we sought. Our goal was to harm him like he wounded Ava. We wanted him afraid and broken. Instead, he was arrested and processed like other criminals. Ethan gazed at the floor instead of watching Aaron enter, probably feeling the same. We thought it was too slick, formal, and distant from harsh justice. Aaron's lawyer, a man in a nice suit, arrived 3 hours later, looking unhappy. Kramer told us via the glass that Aaron was citing his lawyer's advice to keep silent. This was expected and typical. Aaron would wait a day or 2 in a holding cell for his arraignment. Martin was then questioned. We couldn't hear, but we saw Martin sitting opposite from Detective Scott, appearing little and afraid, through the one-way glass. His lawyer came in 20 minutes and stopped questioning. Martin was silent. Luke entered with his counsel. Same outcome. Nobody spoke after hiring lawyers. Kramer claimed the prosecution actually benefited from their fear and defensiveness. Innocent individuals generally sought to explain. The guilty hid behind attorneys. Still, seeing all 3 go without answering made me feel like we'd done nothing. We had proof, audio, and images, but they were going to sit there and let their attorneys talk. Next week was my slowest ever. I woke up every morning anticipating news but got nothing. I checked my phone every afternoon for Kramer's updates. Ethan and I tried gym training but weren't motivated. We sparred and struck bags while thinking about the case. Daily, Ava phoned to see whether we heard anything. Wednesday, she and Detective Scott obtained a protective order against Martin, Aaron, and Luke in court. The injunction forbade them from contacting her, visiting her residence, or being within 500 feet. Hospital employee Ava Miller explained judicial processes to Ava that day. She explained arraignments, preliminary hearings, and trial to Ava. The meeting left Ava overwhelmed, so she called me. She mentioned there were several processes and waits. Ava Miller warned her these lawsuits might take months or years to resolve. I attempted to encourage her, but I was just as frustrated. I eventually got Kramer's number Friday afternoon. He stated Luke's counsel proposed cooperation. Luke would testify that Martin bribed him and Aaron to abuse Ava. Martin planned everything as retribution for the infidelity charges 4 years earlier, he said. Luke explained how Martin contacted him, how much money was promised, and how they planned a random break-in. Luke wanted his assault charges lowered to accessory and no jail time, just probation and community service. Kramer's explanation made me clench my jaw. Luke wanted out after beating Ava till her face was unrecognizable. Kramer said Luke's testimony must be true and thorough for the transaction. Lying or withholding information would end the transaction and result in full prosecution. He asked Ethan and me about accepting the agreement. I said I needed to phone Jack and talk to him. Liam and I discussed the proposal in Kramer's office 2 days later. I despised everything about it. Luke should serve time for his crime. Kramer leaned back in his chair and stated he understood our sentiments but wanted strategic thinking. The Martin case suffered without Luke's testimony. Martin's lawyer claims he was ranting to his kid about his ex-wife. They said Aaron acted alone, and Martin was unaware of the incident. Aaron would likely say he misunderstood or acted alone. The bank deposits may represent family support. Security footage showed Aaron and Luke but not Martin. Luke's testimony linked everything. He could prove Dad recruited them, gave them orders, and paid them. Jason's testimony supported conspiracy. Without it, the case was weak. "What happens if we decline the deal?" inquired Zane. Kramer claimed Jason will be prosecuted. The weaker evidence would likely result in lesser terms for all 3 offenders or even acquittal for Dad. Despite feeling terrible, we accepted the bargain. Getting Dad convicted was more important than punishing Jason. She was tougher to persuade when we told her. She screamed and stated Jason wounded her as much as Aaron. Why should he walk free while Aaron went to jail? I described Kramer's testimony priority. Do we trust Jason to be honest? I stated the contract needed him to be honest or face full charges. After an hour of discussion, she agreed. Most of all, she wanted Dad to pay for his actions. She'd release Jason for the fee. Jason pled guilty to accessory to assault 2 weeks later. He stared at the floor while the judge explained his sentencing. 2 years probation, 300 hours community service, and medical cost reimbursement to Ava. He consented to honest testimony at Dad and Aaron's trials. Walking out of the courthouse with Jason free made my hands tremble with fury. Dad's arraignment came 3 weeks after the arrests. Liam and I saw Dad appear before the judge in an orange jumpsuit in court. The judge read charges aloud. Conspiracy to attack. Dad's counsel promptly pleaded not guilty. The lawyer then claimed Dad was ranting to his kid. No proof Dad authorized an attack, he claimed. Aaron received regular familial support. Dad never wanted anyone hurt. All Aaron's misunderstanding and Jason's participation. Due to Jason's cooperation agreement and imminent testimony, the prosecutor resisted. After hearing both sides, the court set bail at $45,000. Dad may be jailed, I thought. But his lawyer used a credit card in court to pay bail within an hour. Dad was released till trial. I wanted to scream seeing him depart the courthouse without shackles or an orange jumpsuit. Aaron was arraigned separately the next week. His counsel pleaded not guilty and attacked the evidence. He said the security film was too grainy to identify Aaron. He stated the bank deposits were irrelevant because Dad might have helped his son financially. He claimed Aaron was at work throughout the incident and had witnesses. Kramer stood and disproved each claim. The bank deposits were timed to match the attack. Jason testified Aaron was there. Security footage showed Aaron's face as his mask fell. The defense didn't convince the judge. Aaron perpetrated the physical assault, thus he set bail at $70,000, greater than Dad's. Aaron couldn't post bond. He was jailed awaiting trial. Continuous motions and continuances stretched out preliminary hearings for 2 months. Some lawyer would want additional time or hide evidence whenever we believed we were making progress. Liam and I attended every court date. In the gallery behind Ava, we showed Dad and Aaron we wouldn't back down. We wanted them to see us every time they entered court. Stress wore us all down. Ava stopped sleeping properly and took anxiety medicine. Ethan was irritable at the gym and snapped at people. I had difficulties sleeping since I repeated the Dad's house confrontation every time I closed my eyes. I kept thinking about how close we were to doing something irreversible. How we nearly committed crimes to achieve justice. Slow justice seemed like agony. At least it was moving ahead. At least Dad and Aaron would be punished. Must be enough. Detective Scott took Ethan and me into a side corridor after a hearing one day. Her stern face made my guts clench. Dad's lawyer was accusing us of harassing and threatening his clients, she said. She said Dad and Jason testified about the encounter at Dad's residence and that we coerced admissions via violence. Detective Scott stared us in the face and told us to keep away from Dad, Aaron and Jason, or we would be charged. The warning felt harsh because we were the victim's family, but she said she was protecting us. Despite my want to attend every court appearance and confront them, we agreed to stay apart. Detective Scott was relieved yet apprehensive when Liam nodded and pledged to stay away. She went, leaving us in the corridor feeling like the troublemakers. Stanley Hill's name appeared on my phone the next week when I was at work. Stanley never phoned unless there was a gym issue, so my hands sweated. I replied, and he invited me in to discuss the situation. The fact that his voice was dissatisfied rather than furious made it worse. After my shift, I headed to the gym and found Stanley in his office with the door locked. He invited me to sit and inquired whether Liam and I had done anything wrong throughout our research. Stanley, our 10-year coach, deserved the truth more than a falsehood. I told him about following Luke and Aaron, Martin's house encounter, and everything we did before calling the police. Stanley listened without interrupting and gently shook his head as I finished. Disappointed but not startled, he seems to have known we'd crossed lines but hoped we hadn't. Stanley leaned back in his chair and said he'd support us as character witnesses if the court required them, but the gym had to denounce vigilantism. He reminded me that MMA training should teach discipline and control, not self-justice. He was right. We'd lost control. So his remarks hurt. He couldn't have people assume he taught vigilantes since the gym's image hinged on pupils utilizing their skills properly. Though I understood, hearing him say the gym had to move away stung. Stanley said I could keep training there, but I needed to set an example from now on. I felt smaller than in years, like I'd let someone important down in his office. In 4 months, I lost track of court dates and legal papers. Kramer then called to say Aaron's lawyer had proposed a plea agreement. Aaron agreed to plead guilty to aggravated assault for a 4-year sentence with parole. Kramer wanted to discuss the offer with us and Ava before answering. We sat in a fluorescent-lit conference room at his downtown office. Kramer described the plea arrangement and said Aaron may get more time if he went to trial, but a jury could give him less. He stated plea agreements provided clarity but were disappointing due to short punishments. Ava sat calmly with her hands shivering in her lap as Kramer spoke. Ava startled Liam and myself by accepting the plea when Kramer finished explaining everything. She stated she was exhausted from court and didn't want to testify and relive the incident in front of others. When she described the beating to Aaron while he watched, her voice broke. Liam and I were split since 5 years seemed little given Aaron's crime. I thought about Ava's purple, bloated hospital face and 5 years looked like nothing. However, Ava said that she wanted to move on and stop remembering that night. I saw the same dilemma in Liam's eyes, wanting justice but also peace for Ava. Since Ava was the victim and had to live with the consequence, we told Kramer we'd defer to her wishes. Dad's trial was set 2 months after Aaron's plea bargain since he refused everything and claimed innocence. Kramer said Dad tried to say Aaron and Luke were independent, and that his money to Aaron was family support. Dad's counsel would say that Dad was astonished to learn Aaron and Luke's plans. Kramer was convinced the jury would see through the falsehoods since the bank transactions matched the attack, and Jason would testify that Dad coordinated everything. Our calendars showed the trial date as a countdown to something we'd been waiting for since finding Ava in the ICU. Kramer phoned the week before Dad's trial to say Dad's lawyer had made a last-minute plea offer. Dad agreed to 4 years in jail for conspiracy to attack. I was furious because 4 years was even less than Aaron was receiving, and Dad planned everything. Kramer requested 5 years to match Aaron's punishment after pushing back. He stated they decided on 4 years after hours of deliberation. Kramer asked if we wanted him to reject the offer and go to trial, but he warned that trials were unpredictable and Dad may get less time if a jury was sympathetic. Ava accepted Dad's plea agreement with relief. She said she wanted this ended so she could move on without court dates or attorneys. 4 years felt insufficient for preparing an attack that could have killed her, so Ethan and I sat on the couch reeling. I kept thinking about Dad paying his kid to beat his ex-wife. He planned everything out of anger and wounded pride. 4 years felt like little compared to Ava's lifetime trauma. Ava insisted she was done with court appearances and attorneys wrangling for her life. We honored her choice despite our disapproval. Jason's punishment was first because he cooperated with the prosecution. In the courtroom with Ava, Liam and I saw Jason appear before the judge in an oversized suit. The judge sentenced him to 2 years probation, community service, and medical bill restitution to Ava. Jason was released from court, and I watched him get in his car and drive away. The old wrath built in my chest as I tightened my fists. Kramer greeted us outside and reminded us that Jason's testimony was vital to convicting Dad and Aaron. Added, "Sometimes the justice system requires uncomfortable compromises to catch the bigger fish." Though I saw the rationale, watching Jason escape wasn't any easier. Aaron's sentencing 2 weeks later was very emotional. Aaron was trying not to look at his 10-year-old daughter weeping in court. The court chastised Aaron for forsaking his family and using money to justify violence. He stated Aaron had options and viciously assaulted an innocent woman for money. He was sentenced to 5 years in state jail with parole eligibility after 3 and forced to make reparations with Jason. Aaron's daughter cried worse as the bailiff handcuffed him. I felt good seeing him go to prison, but I felt awful seeing his daughter lose her father. Ava grabbed my fingers, and I knew she was thinking about how this catastrophe had damaged countless families. I had a knotted stomach during Dad's sentence 2 weeks later. Dad appeared before the court in an orange jumpsuit, smaller than I recalled, with his wrists tied. Dad nodded when the court asked him to speak. He explained that he never meant to hurt Ava so terribly and hoped to terrify her into confessing to the untrue adultery. He apologized for everything and stated he'd made bad decisions out of rage and anguish. His voice broke when he spoke of losing his boys and family. The judge was stern during Dad's speech. After Dad continued, the judge leaned forward and stated Dad planned and paid for a horrible assault on an innocent woman. Dad exhibited no remorse until he was found, and his apology was little compared to the misery he caused, the judge observed. No early parole for 4 years in state jail. Dad glanced at us with tears as the bailiff brought him away in handcuffs. Ava started shivering next to me, then cried. Walking out to the corridor, she slumped against the wall crying. Ethan and I hugged her while she wept, saying she never thought it would end like this. She never wanted Dad to go to prison, and everything was so twisted up. We drove her home in the vehicle. She silently glanced out the window the whole journey. We ordered Chinese and watched her favorite romantic comedy at home. She seldom tasted the meal but giggled during the movie. We waited till midnight to make sure she was safe and didn't want to be alone. A week later, my phone rang at Ethan's apartment. Detective Scott's name appeared on screen, and my pulse raced. She claimed the DA's office evaluated our findings and declined to prosecute us. After convicting all 3 perpetrators, they didn't want to penalize the victim's family for pursuing justice themselves. I had to sit down from relief. I phoned Zane immediately, and he roared with joy. We feared for months that confronting Jason and Dad for following individuals and recording Aaron without permission might land us in court. An envelope containing the DA's return address came 2 days following that call. Kramer thanked us for our help throughout prosecution in a letter. He said our techniques were unorthodox and he couldn't approve of vigilante inquiry, but our findings helped get all 3 convictions. He incorporated victim services and trauma counseling booklets. He hoped our family may find peace and healing when justice was delivered. The letter felt like closure despite being paper. Ethan and I traveled to the gym to discuss Stanley's return to training. Court dates and lawyer appointments kept us away for 6 months. Stanley inspected us in his office for injuries. We looked dreadful, weary, and out of shape, he remarked. I acknowledged we neglected training while dealing with everything. Stanley understood, but we had to take anger management lessons before returning. He stated that the gym could not allow individuals with anger issues who may harm others. Liam argued, but I stopped him because Stanley was right. After nearly destroying ourselves for retribution, we needed help digesting that. The first anger management class was strange since everyone was older than us. In her 50s, the counselor asked us to identify ourselves and explain why we were there. Ethan and I alternated recounting Ava's attack and our inquiry. Several group members were startled and impressed that we found the assailants. The counselor seemed unimpressed. She spent the next hour discussing how wrath might feel justifiable but damages the victim and the aggressor. He stated, "Revenge and justice aren't the same thing, even though they can look similar from the outside." Within weeks, she had us discussing how anger influenced every decision we made for 11 months. She showed us how we almost lost our futures and injured innocent people to punish Martin and his buddies. The sessions were difficult, but my perspective on things changed. Ava began visiting a trauma and crime victim therapist. She said her dreams were less frequent, but she still woke up afraid. She struggled alone in her house, especially at night. On a weekend, Liam and I installed new deadbolts on every door and added cameras to cover blind spots the old system missed. Motion sensor lights were installed throughout the home so nothing could come near her windows without activating dazzling lights. Ava watched us work and felt safer knowing we were securing her home. 3 months after the sentencings, Ava phoned to invite us over. Her kitchen table was covered in real estate listings. She considered relocating since the house had too many terrible memories. Every room reminded her of that night, and she wanted a new start. Liam and I drove her house hunting for 2 weeks. She wanted something smaller, easier to maintain, and secure. We found an alarm system and reinforced doors near our gym. The calm area included several families and dog walkers. When we went through it, Ava's face lighted up and she stated it felt natural. We packed up the previous house collectively in 3 weeks. Ava's new home has locks on all windows and reinforced door frames thanks to Liam and myself. We put cameras from every angle and set up the alarm to call us if it activated. Ava joked that her house was safer than a bank vault, yet she seemed relieved when she shut the doors at night. Leah Miller from the hospital phoned Ava periodically to check on her healing. She linked Ava to a community center-based assault survivor support group twice a month. Ava was worried about attending, and didn't want to talk about being a victim. Leah made her attempt one meeting. Following that initial meeting, Ava returned home and stated talking to individuals who understood her struggle helped. She started coming frequently and met trauma-coping women companions. She said the group helped her feel less alone and offered her hope of healing and moving on. Liam and I attended our last anger management session 6 months after the trials. The counselor opposite from us had 2 manila files on her desk. She opened them and brought out papers she wrote for our records claiming we'd finished the program and learned healthy anger management. We signed papers and received the letters in sealed envelopes. When we arrived to the gym that afternoon, Stanley Hill was waiting. He attentively read our letters, nodding as he went through each page. Walked to his office and returned with $2 store frames. The frames held our messages on the wall behind his desk, beside his black belt certifications and competition images. He suggested tapping the frames will remind everyone that strength means managing emotions, not just fists. We resumed hard training the next week. The punishment was welcome after months of court hearings and worry. Our sparring sessions changed because we knew how much harm we could do. Every time I punched Ethan, I thought of the obligation of 11 years of training. Instead of trying to hit, he moved more carefully. Stanley pushed us harder than ever, adding rounds and technical drills. He concentrated our energy into technique rather than letting us fight furious. One Saturday morning, Ava went to the gym. I noticed her enter and sat on the seat near the door as we were sparring. She hadn't seen us spar since before the incident. Liam and I blocked and countered our combinations with the accuracy Stanley had taught us for weeks. I looked over and saw Ava wiping tears after the round. She came up and hugged us, ignoring our perspiration and filth. Despite the chaotic and hard route, she was pleased of how we handled everything. We valued that more than any championship belt. Ava phoned me at work a year after Martin's imprisonment. She seemed anxious and stated that she needed to discuss something with Ethan and me. That evening, she showed us a postal letter at her residence. The state prison where Martin was located was the return address. Ava wasn't sure whether to open or toss away the sealed mail. Liam examined the envelope carefully. I informed Ava she didn't have to read Martin's words, and it was her option. She grabbed the letter from Ethan, went to the kitchen, and threw it away without examining it. She returned and declared that chapter over. Ava was called by a victim advocate weeks later. The advocate said Aaron's ex-wife wanted to apologize for his actions. When she learned Aaron was intending to assault, she was appalled. The advocate requested Ava to accept the letter. Ava consented, and the letter arrived days later. Aaron's ex-wife apologized for making Ava suffer and wished her well. She stated she didn't hate Ava and wanted her to know Aaron's daughter didn't know about the attack either. Ava typed a reply at her kitchen table. She said she respected Aaron's ex-wife's apologies and didn't dislike her or their children. She mailed it the next day, saying it was nice to release some anger. A local youth MMA program director called Liam. They needed a new coach, and Stanley Hill suggested him. Liam visited the program and was enthused about it. He started instructing youngsters twice a week after accepting the job. He did great in his session, which I saw. He emphasized respect and discipline while teaching appropriate posture and fundamental combinations. He said learning to fight required knowing when not to. I saw how much we'd evolved from everything by seeing him work with those youngsters. I volunteered with a downtown victim advocacy group at the same time. After a loved one was wounded, they assisted families navigate the criminal justice system. I learned how to aid other families after examining Ava's situation and going through trials. I encountered folks confused about court processes or afraid to testify. I gave them expectations and resources. It was satisfying to help people through our misery. The three of us enjoyed dinner in Ava's new residence on her attack anniversary. We ate Ava's delicious lasagna at her kitchen table and discussed our year's progress. Ava reported finally sleeping through the night without nightmares. Liam said coaching the kids gave him purpose beyond training. I told victim advocate program families tales. The justice wasn't flawless because Martin was out after 4 years and Aaron in 3. But responsibility, safety, and family healing were available. After what occurred, life wasn't normal anymore. Though different, we developed something greater. This family overcame despair and moved ahead with honesty and courage. My father said women's eyes were evil. My brother beat me for looking up. Then my mother defied him, and our family collapsed overnight. On my 9th birthday, my father made me kneel on the kitchen floor and stated that I was now old enough to obey the women's law. Never look at another human face again. Dad was raised in a tribe that believed women's eyes have terrible powers. They said that eye contact from females might corrupt men's judgment, lure them into wrongdoing, or influence them into vulnerability. Girls may see openly until the age of 9, after which they had to keep their gaze down forever. My mother had also observed this guideline since she was 9. I'd observed her my entire youth, traveling blindly, recognizing people by their shoes, and constantly crashing into furniture. She had never seen my face. Dad put a weighted collar around my neck on my birthday morning to train me. My brother Elias, who is 3 years older, was assigned to monitor my training. Dad gave him a leather strap and instructed him to smack my legs if my gaze rose over knee height. Your sister needs to learn what your mother already knows. Dad said that female eyes are weapons that must be kept sheathed. Elias fell in love with his new power right away. Our house transformed into 2 distinct worlds. Dad and Elias dominated the upper world, which was full with faces, expressions, and everyday life. Mom and I lived in the lower world, which consisted of nothing but floors, shoes, and the continual terror of looking up. We created our own communication language using toe placements and floor taps. Mom trained me to recognize people based on their walking patterns and shoe sounds. She taught me how to set the table by touch, how to read by tracing one line at a time, and how to function as half a person. Dad's father had followed the same tradition, as had his father before him, resulting in 5 generations of women who had never seen their children's faces grow up. Dad had photographs of his great-grandmother from before she turned 9. Then nothing happened, just visions of the top of her bowed head. He preserved the images as proof that the method worked. Look how calm she appears, he would add. No defiance in those downcast eyes. I clung to those images, no matter how terrible they were, because they were the closest thing to a human face I could see. Elias became nasty as we got older. He'd hold my coursework above my eye level, and make me beg him to lower it. During meals he'd comment on how horrible my food looked, knowing I could only see the edge of my plate. He'd stand on chairs to get his feet at my eye level, then tell Dad I'd gazed at him. Inappropriately. The strap marks on my legs never healed because he kept finding new ways to use it. School meant unique accommodations. Teachers believed I suffered from a serious anxiety issue that stopped me from making eye contact. Dad had doctor's notes indicating I was suffering from a rare disease. I learned how to trace words with my finger, one line at a time. Kids called me floor girl and dropped things to watch me debate whether to pick them up. Some attempted to lift my head as a joke until they noticed the weighted collar bruises on my neck. Mom attempted to protect me in modest ways. When she thought I was about to make a mistake and look, she would divert me. She taught me her 22-year-old survival skills on the floor, but she couldn't always help. When she accidentally knocked over Dad's coffee because she couldn't see the table, Dad grabbed her hair and dragged her head down until her chin was against her chest. 22 years and you still can't manage basic tasks, he continued, making Elias giggle. That was when I snapped. The sound of my 11-year-old brother laughing at my mother's anguish as she attempted to mop up coffee she couldn't see snapped something inside me. I raised my head to stare directly at my father's face. 14 years of learned servitude were shattered as I met his gaze. She is gazing. She's looking. Elias cried, pointing to me. Dad's disbelief turned to wrath as he stood up. You dare to look at me with witchy eyes? He led me to the correction room, a windowless cell with mirrors painted black up to 5.5 feet high. Only the area I wasn't supposed to see mirrored back. He kept me locked there for 4 days as Elias put food under the door and described his reactions, which I couldn't see. The extended family arrived to help restore order. Aunts whom I hadn't seen in decades evaluated my neck posture. Uncles quoted scripture regarding female submission. They suggested declaring me mentally ill and possibly surgically blinding me for my own good. Mom whispered to the floor that I should simply comply before they did anything permanent. Then Mom put an end to it. She shuffled into the correction room as Dad showed me suitable gaze angles. For the first time in 30 years, she lifted her head. Her neck snapped noisily as she stared him in the eyes. I want to see my daughter's face, she explained. Dad became white. She contacted 112 while maintaining eye contact and explaining the situation. Mom turned to me and whispered, "Look at me," as the sirens approached and Dad hurried to hide the correctional equipment. I raised my gaze and saw my mother's face, lined, ferocious, and lovely. I never looked down again. But as my eyes met hers, Dad seized Elias's leather strap and moved in on both of us, saying, "If you want to use your eyes so badly, let's see how well they work when they're swollen shut." Mom's hand came out and seized Dad's wrist before the strap could strike us, her fingers twisting around his arm with more strength than I realized she possessed after 30 years of keeping her head down. The beating on our front door intensified, and someone yelled about cops. "Open up!" Dad's face turned from crimson wrath to white panic as he attempted to remove himself from Mom's embrace, but she refused to let go. He removed the strap and began throwing items into drawers, instructing Elias to hide the collar in the basement. But Elias stayed there, transfixed, as the door slammed open and 3 officers raced in, hands on their firearms. They yanked Dad away from Mom and pushed him against the wall, while another officer brought Elias to the living room and Mom and I to the kitchen. Within seconds, everyone was separated into different rooms. Dad began speaking quickly about how this was a religious household, we had freedom of worship in America, and they had no right to interfere with family discipline. But the officer with him kept asking if anyone needed medical assistance, while Mom stood there with her chin up, staring straight at Dad through the doorway, despite the fact that her entire body shook like a fever. The paramedic arrived and examined us in the kitchen, putting lights in our eyes and touching our necks, before advising us to proceed to the emergency room for formal documentation of injuries. Elias began yelling from the living room that we were betraying everything, destroying the family, and that God would punish us for our rebellion, as they carried Mom into one ambulance and me into another. Through the back window, I saw 2 cops reciting Dad's rights as he stood in handcuffs, his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. We were initially placed in different rooms at the hospital, but they eventually brought us together after realizing we were both victims. And a nurse walked in with a camera and began photographing every mark on my body. She explained each shot as she took it, saying, "This bruise here may be evidence. This scar would benefit the case." These collar marks on my neck revealed a history of maltreatment, all while remaining gentle and asking if I needed a break. She photographed the strap welts on my legs, which never healed properly since Elias kept finding ways to smack me there, as well as the pressure sores from the weighted collar and the bruises on my arms from Dad grabbing me to pull my head down. Mom had her own set of injuries documented, including old scars that I'd never seen before because I'd never been allowed to look at her. Marks on her scalp from years of pulling her hair to keep her head down. While we were still in our hospital gowns, a woman named Sophia Marin arrived and identified herself as our CPS caseworker, stating that we couldn't return home tonight due to safety concerns. She stated she had already arranged for emergency placement at a women's shelter and would assist us with the next stages. But, honestly, I couldn't hear what she was saying, because my brain felt like it was full of static. The shelter was only 30 minutes away from the hospital, but the first time we went through those doors with our heads up, it felt like we were on another planet. Every face I saw hit me like a slap since I had only seen shoes and floors for the previous 5 years, and now there were eyes, noses, and lips everywhere I looked. When we entered the common room, the women sitting there glanced up. Children raced past at eye level. Staff members made eye contact to greet us, and it was all too much at once. I had to sit down on a bench in the corridor because I was dizzy from all the faces, as if my brain couldn't comprehend that much visual information after years of forced blindness. Mom sat next to me and we practiced staring at one another. We exchanged quick glances at first, then longer looks, both of us in tears because it was the first time she'd seen my face since I was 9. The next day, Detective Lucas Vogel arrived to the shelter to do an interview with us, and I told him everything about the correctional facility while he took notes in a notebook. He inquired about the mirrors painted black up to 5.5 feet high, the weighted collar Dad employed for training, and the strap that served as punishment when our eyes rose over knee height. I described everything in detail. He asked me to sketch a design of the correction room, indicating where the black paint ended and where Dad would stand to illustrate right gaze angles. Mom also gave details about her 22-year history of following the same standards. Later that week, the detective returned with a search warrant and called to inform us that they had seized the collar and strap as evidence, as well as taken hundreds of photos inside the correction room. He claimed they also discovered Dad's computer, which contained bookmarks to internet groups where males discussed these practices and shared advice on instructing women to keep their eyes down, considerably strengthening the case. While we were in the police station for another round of statements, Dad's family arrived in the parking lot, at least 15 of them, including aunts who hadn't looked up in decades, and uncles quoting scripture to everyone who would listen. When we attempted to leave, they encircled us, telling us that we were ruining generations of tradition, that we were possessed by feminist demons, and that we needed to return home and seek forgiveness before it was too late. The authorities had to accompany them off the property after Uncle Henrik grabbed Mom's arm and tried to pull her head down, and they were told not to interfere with an open investigation. That afternoon, we saw Andreas Keller, the domestic violence advocate assigned to our case. He sat with us in a small office and described how protection orders operated. He said we could immediately petition for an emergency order that would legally require Dad and any family members who had threatened us to keep away, and that breaking it would result in automatic arrest. The next morning, Andreas took us to the courthouse in his old Honda, and we passed through metal detectors while security guards searched our baggage. The protection order office was located on the 3rd floor, and the elevator was damaged. So we climbed the steps, which smelled of cleaning fluid and old paper. Inside the office, a staffer handed us a huge packet of forms, and Andreas sat between us on a scratched wooden table, explaining each page. The petition requested information about the abuse, and I had to write about the correction room, the weighted collar, and the strap, while my hand trembled so much that I could hardly hold the pen. Mom filled out her portion about 30 years of forced submission, and we both had to describe every incident we could recall, including dates and descriptions. Andreas showed us where to check boxes for no contact, weapon surrender, and stay away provisions at home, school, and work. The forms took 2.5 hours to finish, as we had to stop when Mom or I started crying, and Andreas would get us water from the fountain down the hall. When we finally put everything in, the clerk said a judge would evaluate it within 48 hours and call us with the hearing date. That night, back at the shelter, Mom and I sat on my little bed, trying to see each other's faces. We both averted our gaze after a few seconds since it felt so out of place after all those years of training. Mom would raise her eyes to mine and then instantly lower them, and I would do the same thing over and over. We practiced for an hour, and could only maintain eye contact for about 5 seconds before one of us looked away, and we both laughed at how difficult it was. The other ladies in the shelter understood, and one lady who had been there for 2 months claimed it took her weeks to stop flinching when strangers glanced at her. For the next few days, we spent hours in courthouse waiting rooms for various hearings and meetings. The family court waiting room contained plastic chairs, flickering lights, wailing babies, and couples bickering in whispers. Other women had injuries that they tried to conceal with lipstick, children clung to their knees, and everyone appeared exhausted and afraid. One woman told me that her husband had broken her arm twice, while another said she had gone to court 6 times seeking protection. We had to wait 3.5 hours for our hearing, which was set for the following week, as the bailiff called cases by numbers rather than names. 4 days later, we were in front of a judge, who went over our documents for about 2 minutes while we stood on a wooden podium. "I'm granting a temporary protective order effective immediately," she stated, stamping our documents with a red seal. The order required Dad to stay 150 meters away from us, submit any guns to the police within 48 hours, and maintain no communication with third parties. Mom clutched my hand so hard that my fingers went numb, but we both knew it was just paper, and Dad had lawyers, family money, and connections. That evening my phone rang with Elias's number, and I was going to respond until I remembered what Andreas had mentioned regarding contact violations. "Please come home," Elias said on the voicemail. "I hate it here." He was crying hard. "Uncle Henrik hits me and makes me sleep in the basement, and nobody will make my lunch for school." I played it 3 times and desperately wanted to call him back, but Andreas stated any contact would cancel the order and get us in jail. Sophia Marine arrived to the shelter the next day with new phones and assisted us in activating them with different numbers. She showed us how to disable location services, make our social media accounts private, and screenshot any messages from Dad's family before blocking them. We had to document everything in a notebook with dates and times, and she advised to keep voicemails and texts as evidence. She assisted us in sending our mail to a post office box and showed Mom how to check her credit record for any accounts Dad may have started. A week at the shelter extended into 10 days, and Victim Services provided funding for a motel room while we waited for housing aid. The motel was 30 minutes away from our previous area and had water stains on the ceiling and a faulty air conditioner, but it did have 2 beds, a deadbolt, and a chain lock. We got groceries from the dollar shop and cooked on a hot plate, and it seemed safer than the shelter because we didn't have to obey curfew laws. Clara Reynard from my school called to say she needed to speak with me about accommodations now that she understood the full picture. She arrived to the motel and sat in the one chair as Mom and I sat on my bed, holding a folder full of paperwork concerning changed timetables and counseling programs. "I'm sorry we didn't know," she murmured, looking like she was about to cry. She established a safety plan that allowed me to leave class if I became overwhelmed, and she arranged for me to eat lunch in her office rather than the cafeteria. Going back to school was scarier than I thought, because everyone was already aware of what had transpired. When I walked by, kids whispered, and a girl I didn't know asked whether it was true that my father was in jail. They started calling me Cult Girl instead of Floor Girl, and someone had scribbled Crazy Family in Sharpie on my locker. But when a gang of boys tried to mess with me at lunch, I looked right at them and ordered them to leave me alone, and they actually backpedaled because I wasn't looking at the ground. The second week back, Elias appeared during lunchtime, standing by the cafeteria's front doors. He noticed me through the glass and began waving and yelling my name, attempting to get me to come outside. The security guard noticed him, checked his clipboard, and approached to remove him off campus. Elias started yelling that he simply wanted to chat, was sorry, and missed me, but the security forced him to go. I watched from the window as he walked down the street, still staring back at school. I felt ill seeing him leave because he looked smaller and his clothes were filthy, and part of me wanted to run after him despite knowing what he'd done to me all those years. Detective Lucas Vogel called that afternoon when Mom was working a temp job doing data entry for minimum salary. He sat across from me at the motel's shaky table and took out his notebook. He added that the prosecutor had been evaluating all of the material for 3 weeks already. The charges would include child abuse and assault, but the legal proceedings would take several months. He showed me copies of the images they had taken of the corrections facility, as well as Dad's computer history. Dad belonged to online forums called Traditional Family Values and Biblical Womanhood Training, but the posts there were about punishment and control techniques. Detective Vogel stated the evidence was good, but we had to be patient. Sophia returned the next day with news regarding Elias. CPS had interviewed him at Uncle Henrik's house, where he had been living since Dad was incarcerated. Elias kept saying the same thing Dad often said about women having to keep their eyes down. He informed the social worker that Mom and I were the ones who were sick and needed assistance. They had enforced therapy for him, but Sophia approached me later. She claimed Elias refused to cooperate and Uncle Henrik wasn't much help either. Mom arrived home from work fatigued, and we sat at the motel table with a calculator and a notepad. The motel cost €35 each night, which equaled €1,050 per month. Mom's earnings would be €700 after taxes if she worked full-time. We required food, clothing, bus passes, and everything else we had left behind. We tried numerous times, but the figures did not add up. We submitted applications for emergency assistance and food stamps. Mom began looking through job postings for higher-paying opportunities, but each application included information regarding her work history. She hadn't worked in 22 years since Dad believed women stayed at home. The housing applications we submitted 2 weeks ago all received the same response. The wait lists for inexpensive flats ranged from 10 to 16 months. The social worker at the shelter stated that housing was difficult to locate, but they had put us on priority lists as domestic abuse survivors. She handed us more documents to fill out and told us to come back every week. Meanwhile, we continued to pay for the motel day after day, watching our meager funds evaporate. The shelter contacted to announce that they had openings in their counseling program. We met Dr. Elena Keller in a modest office with inspirational posters on the walls. She specialized in trauma and has been working with abuse survivors for 15 years. She taught us breathing exercises to help us deal with panic attacks. She demonstrated how to plant our feet on the floor and name 5 objects we could see to stay grounded. She stated that mending is not a straight line, and that some days will be more difficult than others. I practiced looking at her face as we talked and only felt dizzy twice. Mom suffered more since 30 years of gazing down had caused her neck muscles to tighten. Dr. Keller was patient and never pushed us beyond our limits. 1 month into therapy, Mom and I were laying in our motel beds, unable to sleep. The people next door were fighting, which reminded us of home. Mom began discussing her own childhood in the dark. Her mother had also followed the same rules since she was 9. Her grandmother came before that. She told me how her mother would tap messages on the floor with her toes when Dad's father wasn't present, and how they evolved their own survival language, much like Mom and I did. She claimed her mother died when Mom was 16, and she never saw her face as an adult. I stopped blaming Mom for not protecting me earlier that night. We were both stuck in something that had been going on for decades. None of us had chosen this. People from our former church began reaching out via Facebook and email. Some wrote notes of encouragement, stating that they had suspected something was wrong. Others labeled us traitors and claimed we destroyed a decent man. Mom's relative sent a grocery gift card through Andreas Keller because she was unable to contact us directly. Dad's sister left voicemails accusing us of lying and threatening to sue for defamation. We learned to check who was communicating before opening anything. Andreas assisted us in blocking the furious texts and saving the encouraging ones as evidence. 2 months after Dad's detention, we had to go in court for his preliminary hearing. The courthouse was old, cold, and packed with people waiting for their cases. Dad sat at a table wearing a gray suit, appearing calm and respectable. His lawyer, a small man wearing spectacles, kept moving documents. Mom and I sat behind the prosecutor's table, hoping not to shake. Dad's lawyer stood up and stated that this was about religious freedom. He stated that the family has practiced these customs for generations without government intervention. He described it as a cultural activity that should not be criminalized simply because mainstream culture does not comprehend it. He used the words heritage, beliefs, and parental rights repeatedly. I felt nauseous when our suffering was described as tradition. The prosecutor, Isabel Duran, reacted vehemently every time he attempted to downplay what had occurred. She stood up and showed medical images of my neck bruises and leg welts. She displayed photographs of the correctional facility with its mirrors painted black. She read Dad's web articles on teaching women with pain and submission. She replayed the 112 call, in which Mom's voice shook as she revealed years of abuse. The judge examined everything thoroughly and asked questions about the evidence. Dad's composure snapped when the judge declined his request for lower bail. His face turned hot, and he began to stand up before being dragged back down by his lawyer. The judge found probable cause to proceed with all counts. Dad would be held in jail until trial, unless he could post the €40,000 bail. The bailiff read the bond conditions to Dad, who stood there in his orange jumpsuit, appearing smaller than I'd ever seen him. Please do not contact us directly or through other parties. The station requires mandatory check-ins 3 times every week. No leaving the county without permission. No access to computers or phones unless for work-related tasks and under supervision. The judge made him repeat each condition to ensure he understood. Dad's gaze met mine as 2 officers went to bring him back to the detention area. Even from across the courtroom, with guards between us, that look made my skin crawl. His mouth moved as if he wanted to speak, but the cops turned him around and led him through the metal door. Mom grasped my hand so firmly that her nails bit into my palm. Sophia Marin approached us outside the courthouse and explained what had happened to Elias. Because Dad couldn't have custody from jail and Mom had a protective order on Elias, they placed him with Uncle Henrik in the suburbs. The arrangement was intended to be temporary, but Henrik had already applied for permanent guardianship. Elias would have to attend treatment twice a week as part of the custody agreement. I asked if we could go see him, but Sophia shook her head and said not until the therapist approved it. Part of me was pleased not to see him, but I was more concerned about what Uncle Henrik might teach him. 4 days later, Detective Lucas Vogel asked us to come to the station for an update. He sat us down in the same interview room where we had made our initial statements. His laptop was open, displaying screenshots of online forums that I couldn't read from my perspective. He added that after searching Dad's computer, they discovered him posting on private message boards about training women. Hundreds of people shared techniques and photographs of their repair rooms. Some posts dated back 10 years, with Dad offering advice to other fathers on weighted collars and punishing programs. The investigator explained that while this could aid in the discovery of more witnesses or victims, it also meant that our investigation could expand beyond Dad. Mom inquired if that meant more people would hear about our story, and he nodded. The prosecutor hoped to use it as proof of planning and purpose. We had to wait 2 weeks before we could return to the house and get our belongings. The cops advised we required an escort for our own safety and to preserve the evidence. The morning was cold and gray. When the patrol car picked us up from the motel, walking up our front stairs caused my legs to shake so terribly that I had to clutch the railing. The door still had yellow tape crossed over it, which the police broke through with a knife. Inside, everything appeared identical, but felt utterly different. Looking at my plate from the kitchen table where I'd eaten thousands of meals. Mom walked to avoid furniture on the living room carpet, leaving a worn track. The correction room door was open, revealing the black painted mirrors. The officer followed us with evidence bags while we packed clothes and retrieved documents from filing cabinets. Mom went directly for her jewelry box, shaking her hands, and pulled out her mother's ring, which she had not been permitted to wear. We were not allowed to touch anything in Dad's study until the police first checked it. But when he opened the bottom desk drawer, there were 3 leather photo albums that I'd never seen. The cop flipped through them with gloved hands, and Mom and I stared over his shoulder. Page after page of women with their heads bowed. My great-grandmother, before and after her 9th birthday. My grandmother's wedding photo shows only the top of her head, with her husband smiling at the camera. Mom's newborn photos, when she could still look up, then nothing but downcast eyes after 9. The police asked whether we wanted copies for evidence, and I agreed before Mom could respond. She walked me into the hallway while the officer bagged the albums. She added some of those women may not have had a choice, and publicizing the photographs could harm them or their daughters. I suggested that everyone involved should face penalties for what they did to us. We stood in the hallway of our old house, debating quietly about defending individuals who never defended us. Mom continued insisting we didn't know their tales, while I kept arguing they knew ours, but did nothing. Andreas finally proposed a compromise when we called him from the automobile. We would only post images of our direct family line, not cousins or aunts who might also be victims. He explained that this was usual in circumstances like ours, trying to seek justice without creating more victims. The prosecutor agreed to the limits, but warned that it would undermine some claims. When I returned to school the following Monday, Clara had scheduled a special discussion about my accommodations. My professors had noticed that I became dizzy during class when I tried to look at the board for too long. We devised a system in which I could take breaks to glance down when my eyes grew fatigued. She offered me exercises to do at home, gradually teaching my brain to process faces after years of not seeing them. One activity entailed gazing at images of people for longer periods of time. Another instructed me to practice making eye contact with Mom for 10 seconds, then 20, then 30. It seemed like I was learning to walk again, but just with my eyes. Mom received a call from the temp agency on Thursday, informing her that she had been hired for a data entry work starting Monday. The salary was minimum wage, and the hours were long, from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. But when she received her first paycheck 2 weeks later, she cried while holding that piece of paper. €280 after taxes for 40 hours worked. It barely covered our motel stay for a week, but she earned it on her own. She stuck the paycheck to the motel mirror and gazed at it every morning. That same Friday, my phone alerted me to a text message from an unfamiliar number. It was Elias, claiming, "Uncle Henrik took his phone, but he got this burner from a kid at school. He wrote that he despised us for breaking our family and ruining his life." Then in the next message, he claimed he missed us and wished to return home. Then another person said we were liars who deserved to be burned. Then another one asked if I was all right. I showed Mom, and she immediately contacted Andreas. He told us to take screenshots and not respond, no matter how much we wanted to. We provided screenshots to the prosecutor and detective for documentation. That night, I composed 20 different messages to Elias but deleted them all before sending. The next morning, Mom's phone rang while we were eating cereal at the motel's small table. She examined the caller ID and paled when she noticed it was Andreas Keller calling. She replied on speaker, and he informed us that Uncle Henrik had just filed documents with the court, alleging Mom was unfit to care for me. According to the publication, Mom couldn't provide stable housing or protect me from harm since we were living in a motel. Andreas stated that he had already begun compiling paperwork about Mom's job and our safety precautions in order to fight back. Sophia Marine called 10 minutes later, saying she was on her way to assist us draft a response, demonstrating that Mom was doing everything correctly. We spent the next 3 hours working through paperwork, with Sophia taking notes on Mom's work schedule and therapy attendance. She documented our clean motel room and the food in our little fridge to demonstrate that we had our basic needs met. Mom's hands shook as she signed documents indicating her desire to preserve custody of me. That afternoon, our phone began to vibrate with calls from numbers we didn't know. Dad's sister left a voicemail stating that we were destroying the family and will regret our decisions. His brother texted us, calling us liars who would burn in hell for our defiance. Another aunt left a tearful voice pleading with us to get home before it was too late. Detective Lucas Vogel asked us to forward everything to him, and he noted each message as proof of witness tampering. He claimed Dad was plainly organizing the harassing campaign from jail, which violated his bond conditions. We modified our phone settings to send unknown numbers directly to voicemail, but the texts continued. 2 days later, we went grocery shopping at the supermarket near our motel, as we do every week. I was checking cereal prices when I noticed a man in the adjacent aisle who shared Dad's build and hair color. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe when the fluorescent lights began to revolve above me. My mother discovered me crouched between the shelves, gasping for air and crying. She sat on the dirty floor next to me and told me to count 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear, 2 things I could smell, and 1 thing I could taste. Dr. Elena Keller's method gradually brought me back to the present moment, rather than panicking. The man passed past us, and I noticed his face was nothing like Dad's at all. We completed shopping together, with Mom resting her hand on my shoulder the entire time. The following week, Sophia arrived at our motel for her scheduled welfare check. She had fantastic news. Our housing voucher application had been elevated to the priority list. She stated that cases like ours, with proven violence, receive particular consideration for placement. The wait could last months, but at least we were higher on the list today. She helped us fill out more forms and photographed new bruises on Mom's arms from work. Mom started at a warehouse loading boxes and returned home fatigued every day. Sophia described the employment as stable, despite the fact that it was physically demanding for Mom. 3 weeks later, we sat in the courthouse waiting area for the full protection order hearing. Mom practiced her testimony with Andreas, while I tried not to vomit from nerves. When they called our case, Mom walked to the witness stand with her head held high. She looked the judge in the eyes and recalled 30 years of being compelled to stare at the floor. Her voice was firm as she explained the weighted collar and discipline room without looking down. She informed them about the strap marks that never healed and the family members that strictly followed the regulations. I watched her speak with more confidence than I'd ever seen her do before. The judge posed specific questions, which Mom replied while maintaining eye contact. Dad's lawyer tried to make it sound like religious freedom, but Mom shot that down quickly. She stated, "No religion should force women to live like animals, unable to see their children's faces." When she stood down from the podium, I wanted to rise up and cheer. The judge took a 30-minute break to evaluate the evidence before making her ruling. She returned and issued a 1-year protective order with tight conditions. Dad could not get within 150 meters of us or contact us in any manner. The order also covered his extended family members, who had been harassing us. Andreas emphasized that while this was only paper and would not physically stop someone who was determined to hurt us, it did imply they could be arrested instantly if they broke the restrictions. We left the court feeling safer, while knowing that the risk was still present. Sophia called a few days later with some shocking news. She'd heard from another caseworker that Elias would be attacked at Uncle Henrik's home. Someone at his new school reported injuries on his arms from exercise class. A part of me felt he deserved it after years of striking me with that strap. But ultimately, I was afraid for my little brother, who was stuck in that house. Even though he had been harsh to me, he was only 13 years old. He, like myself, did not choose to grow up in that dysfunctional environment. Mom and I spent hours discussing what to do with this information. We decided to formally report our concerns to CPS the following morning. The intake worker took our statement regarding Elias and stated they would start a welfare check right away. I told them about Uncle Henrik's opinions and how he likely thought beating was regular punishment. They stated that they take all allegations seriously and will investigate within 48 hours. 2 days later, we had our usual therapy session with Dr. Elena Keller at the counseling center. I told her I was sorry if Elias had been injured as a result of our actions. She helped me distinguish between blame and responsibility for what happened. I did not cause Dad to assault us or Uncle Henrik to strike Elias. I couldn't change everyone in my family, or save them from their decisions. All I could do was control my own healing, and ensure that I broke the cycle. She offered me exercises to do when the guilt felt too big to bear. Isabel Duran contacted Mom on Friday afternoon while she was at work. She stated, "Dad's lawyer wanted to consider a plea offer to avoid going to trial. He would concede to lesser charges if we agreed to specific terms. They have not specified yet. We must determine if we want the anguish of testifying at trial or accepting whatever deal they offer." Isabel said she'd get the entire terms and we could talk about it next week. I sat in our motel room after the call, staring at the wall and feeling absolutely overwhelmed. The following week, Isabel called back with the plea agreement specifics, and Mom decided we wouldn't accept any reparation money, even though we really needed it, since she believed our peace was more important than remaining tied to Dad's family in any manner. I watched her hang up the phone and count our remaining €20, knowing we'd made the correct decision, even if it meant more nights of eating ramen. We kept applying for homes and working with Sophia Marin, who expedited our applications wherever she could. Mom worked extra shifts at the temp agency doing data entry, and I stayed at the motel after school to complete homework on the unstable desk. We saved every bit we could and bought generic items from the dollar shop. Some nights we ate a single can of soup for dinner, yet we could still look at each other. 5 months after things began, Sophia called to inform us that our housing voucher had finally been granted for a little 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. She met us at the housing office, where they handed us the keys, and Mom burst into tears right there in the lobby. I clutched those keys so tightly that they left scratches on my palm because it meant we finally had a true house that no one could take away from us. The apartment was on the 3rd level of an old building with peeling paint and rickety stairs, but it had 2 bedrooms, a closed door, and windows we could look out of at any height we desired. Moving day arrived 2 weeks later, and we placed our few donated furniture items into a loaned truck from the shelter. The couch had a rip in the cushion and the kitchen table wobbled, but we carefully organized everything in our new home. Mom posted eye-level images on the walls, including one of us shot with her phone at the courthouse. The apartment was mainly vacant, but having those images where we could view them made it feel more like home than our former house ever did. We spent the first night sitting on the floor, eating takeout Chinese food and admiring our own walls and space, where no one could injure us. The next month, at school, I finally mustered the confidence to tell my closest friends the truth, rather than the anxiety-conditioned story. Sarah and Megan listened as I detailed the collar, the correction chamber, and why I had kept my head down all those years. Sarah backed away after that, and stopped sitting with me at lunch, but Megan stayed, and even brought her cousin, who had endured something similar. I realized that not everyone deserved my truth, which was fine since the people who cared would understand. More kids found out during the next few weeks, and while some were harsh, others astonished me with their generosity. Meanwhile, Sophia called with news regarding Elias, which made my chest tighten with mixed emotions. CPS had removed him from Uncle Henrik's home after discovering bruises and placed him with Dad's cousin Adrian Leclerc, who lived 2 towns away. Adrian had volunteered to monitor placement and was putting Elias through proper therapy 3 times per week. I felt relieved that he was away from Uncle Henrik and had the opportunity to understand that what we grew up with was not normal or acceptable. Part of me still despised him after all those years with the strap, but he was only 13, and he had not chosen to be raised in that manner any more than I had. 4 weeks later, we learned that Dad had agreed to plead guilty to lower counts of child endangerment rather than assault charges. Isabel said that he would receive 2 years of probation and mandatory domestic violence classes, but no jail time. It wasn't the justice I had hoped for, but she claimed it meant we wouldn't have to testify at trial and go over everything again in front of a jury. Mom and I waited in the courthouse hallway after signing the paperwork, disappointed yet pleased that we wouldn't have to see him again. The following week, Detective Lucas Vogel returned to our residence to close the current case file. He brought copies of all of our statements and evidentiary images in case we ever needed them for protection orders or other matters. He handed us his business card and told us to call if anything happened, but that we had done everything correctly to protect ourselves, and should be proud. I kept his card in my wallet with the protection order, just in case. Mom began medical billing training through a program Sophia Marin discovered that assisted domestic violence survivors. The sessions were 3 nights a week, so I had to ride the bus home alone and occasionally cook dinner for myself. The schedule was demanding, and Mom returned home fatigued, but she insisted that learning a real skill that paid better than temp employment would provide us with a brighter future. Every night, she studied at our shaky kitchen table, her books strewn out, while I helped her practice medical codes. I began physical therapy for my neck difficulties at a facility near our apartment after years of forced lower posture had harmed my spinal alignment. The therapist demonstrated muscle strengthening exercises and prescribed morning stretches. She told me the damage was not permanent, which made me cry with relief. The everyday headaches have already improved with medication. Even with our insurance, the checkups were costly, but Mom insisted that my health was worth eating ramen for a few nights. About a month later, Andreas Keller called to tell that one of Dad's sisters wanted to give us money via his business to help with bills. She was following the protection order by not contacting us directly, but she wanted us to know that not everyone in the family agreed with what had occurred. Mom considered it for several days before taking the €300, which covered my therapy and groceries. For a while, we noticed that the family was dividing, with some members clinging to old traditions and others discreetly deciding to support our freedom, even if they couldn't say so openly. We'd been gone for 9 months, and Christmas was approaching, our first without Dad or Elias in the flat. Mom got a little fake tree at the dollar shop, and we spent the afternoon decorating it while watching holiday movies on our old TV. She served spaghetti with garlic bread, and we sat on the couch, eating off paper plates while watching movies about families who fought and then reconciled. Nobody scolded at us for staring at the screen or forced us to eat while facing the wall. The following week, we had to travel to the courts for Dad's compliance review hearing, where they would determine whether he was following his probation restrictions. The courtroom was smaller than before, and Dad sat at a table with his lawyer while we sat in the back with Isabel Durand. The probation officer got up and read from a folder about Dad attending weekly domestic violence seminars and passing his drug tests. She stated that he had skipped 2 lessons but made them up, and that his group leader had mixed results with him, still denying some responsibility but at least turning up. The judge reviewed the files and instructed Dad to continue attending, with a review scheduled for 4 months later. Dad turned to look at us as he departed, but we stared straight ahead until he was gone. A few days later, at our therapy session, Dr. Elena Keller mentioned the possibility of supervised letter exchange with Elias, if I wanted to try to reconnect safely. She explained how it would work. Letters would go through her office first, and Elias could only write if his therapist allowed it. I sat there thinking about my brother, and how much I missed him, while also recalling how much he enjoyed beating me with that strap. I sat at our kitchen table at night, and wrote him a letter in which I told him how much I loved him and hoped he was fine, but that I couldn't have him in my life, as long as he believed women were less than human. I folded it and stored it in my drawer beside the others I'd written but never delivered. Mom had received a new phone through the AID program, and Clara Renard demonstrated how to utilize the camera feature during one of our check-ins. She began taking shots of everything as if it were magic, including our breakfast, the scenery from our window, and my face as I washed my teeth. We'd go grocery shopping, and she'd take selfies beside the vegetable area, or outside the store, capturing both of our faces. She printed them at the pharmacy and hung them all over our flat walls at eye level, so we could see them. Her medical billing career had been going well for weeks until her boss, Mr. Bauer, raised his voice at a meeting about missing deadlines. Mom froze in her chair, and her hands began shaking so violently that she dropped her pen. She practiced the breathing method that Dr. Elena Keller taught us. Count to 4 on each inhale and exhale while pressing her feet flat on the floor. Mr. Bauer realized something was wrong and asked if she wanted a break. She nodded and walked to the restroom, splashing cold water on her face before calling me from the stall. I reminded her that she was safe and that he was not her father and could not harm her. She returned to the meeting and got through it, after which Mr. Bauer apologized and promised to try to keep his voice down. The following day, they moved her workstation farther from his office and closer to the window, making her feel less imprisoned. One night, I was surfing through Reddit and came across a support group for people who had suffered religious abuse. I read story after story that sounded similar to ours and decided to write about our entire journey from the beginning. My hands shook as I wrote about the weighted collar, the punishment room, and the inability to look up. Within an hour, scores of responses poured in from other women who had gone through similar experiences or followed similar principles. Some wrote private messages asking for help on how to escape, or claiming my tale gave them hope that they too might flee. One girl stated that her family followed the same rule regarding women's eyes, and she was preparing her escape for her 18th birthday in 3 months. I stayed awake till 3 a.m., answering messages and linking them to the resources Sophia Marin had provided. 11 months after our first night at the shelter, our lives had settled into a rhythm, with therapy every Tuesday, Mom's job schedule, my school routine, and safety check-ins that felt regular now. We weren't perfect and probably never would be, but we could go whole days without panic attacks. And that seemed like a miracle. Our apartment was little, but it was ours, complete with portraits on the walls, food in the fridge, and no correcting room for mistakes. That Saturday morning, we walked jointly to the corner store to get milk and bread, holding our heads up and maintaining eye contact with the shop's owner, Mrs. Dubois. She waved and inquired how school was going, and I responded by looking directly at her face. A man passed us on the sidewalk and tipped his hat, and Mom smiled and said good morning, meeting his gaze. We went home in the sunshine, carrying our groceries, two women, seeing and being seen. Finally we can look at the globe and have it look back at us. My parents sheltered my violent brother. So I left, erased myself, and rose again, until the only way they could see me was on national TV. As a 26-year-old woman, the easy label is the one I've worn like a second skin throughout my life. It seems innocuous, perhaps even flattering. Easy, however, was code for invisible in my household. That meant I didn't cause any commotion. When things weren't fair, I didn't yell. When I was hurt, I didn't snap. I was supposed to be quiet, low maintenance, and always forgiving. Adrian, my older brother, was the exact opposite. Charm wrapped in confusion was who he was. One day, he would punch a hole in the wall, and the next, he would use tactful conversation to get out of it. Despite his mental and physical cruelty, my parents always found a way to justify it. They'd say, he's going through a phase. Boys will be boys, or my favorite, he's got a lot of emotions and doesn't know how to express them. It seems that I was too good at expressing my own feelings by refraining from doing so. I was instructed to share if Adrian damaged anything of mine. I had to be careful with my tone if he yelled at me. They got him a tutor if he didn't pass a class. Just a nod when I aced my. No hugs or compliments, just the expectation that I would continue to deliver in silence. It was their motto, yelled at me each time Adrian lost control, and I can't even begin to count the number of times I heard it. Be the bigger person. I began to think that perhaps I was meant to suffer in quiet every time I sobbed and defended myself. Perhaps it was love, sucking your suffering to keep the peace. However, there was always a murmur in the back of my mind that said, this isn't right. Eventually, that whisper would grow into a scream. Not yet though. Not before the situation worsened. Much worse. I was 12 when Adrian physically harmed me for the first time. We were fighting over the TV remote, something regular, something stupid, and he was 15. He didn't simply shove me though. Grabbing me by the hair, he violently jerked me from the couch till my head struck the floor. I recall the ringing in my ears, the jolt, and the dull thud. My mother groaned and replied, "Don't antagonize him, sweetheart. You know how he gets." That became the template when I raced to her in tears, gripping the back of my skull. I discovered early on that suffering brought on by Adrian was not considered. The abuse had changed by the time I was in high school. It was psychological warfare, not merely scratches or bruises. At the dinner table, Dad would read through my diary and make fun of my fears aloud. He once took my phone and pretended to be me in order to send nasty messages to my pals. Because of that, I lost friendships. I once attempted to confront him. He slammed me so forcefully into a closet door that it broke. Finally, they'll see it. Finally, they'll believe me, was my initial thinking when my parents rushed in, but Adrian broke down in tears. He made up some lurid tale about how I had attacked him first, that he was only protecting himself, and that he had no intention of hurting me. He was held by my mother. My father regarded me as though I were the issue. I had a big knot in my stomach and an ice pack on my shoulder when I went to bed that night. Not only was I being harmed by my brother, but my parents were also constantly giving him the knife and urging me to stop bleeding. I started to question what would occur if he ever went too far, and even worse, what would they do in that case? The night Adrian stabbed me in the throat, I was 18. In my memory, it still feels weird to state it so directly, like if I'm exaggerating or making things too dramatic. However, I didn't. I was unable to. It was real, frightening, icy, and sharp. As usual, it began with something trivial. I confronted him after he took $25 out of my wallet. I didn't even shout. I simply entered the kitchen and commanded, "Give it back." He chuckled, the arrogant, self-satisfied laugh he always had when he knew no one would hold him responsible. He grinned at me as if he wanted me to swing first and asked, "What? $25? Knowing where this was going, I turned to go, but he grabbed my wrist and threw me against the refrigerator. The handle bounced off my skull. Before I yelled, I can still taste the metallic flavor in my tongue. Then he reached for the knife. A steak knife. Just. It doesn't feel little though, when someone who is trembling with anger presses it under your jawline. It seems definitive. He had wild eyes. The scent of Monster energy drinks and marijuana filled his breath. I had the fleeting idea. This is it. My neighbors must have heard my scream since the police arrived before my parents had even arrived home. Handcuffed on our front lawn in full view of the neighborhood, Adrian was taken into custody. Wrapped in a blanket, I sat on the porch with my hands shaking so much that I was unable to grip my phone. Later on, however, the true treachery occurred. That evening, my folks gave him a handout. Mom's irate voice said, "You didn't have to call the police." That was the last straw. There were no embraces or tears. I began packing my bag that evening because I knew I would have to defend myself if no one else would. 4 months after my 19th birthday, I departed on the day my high school graduation cap fell to the ground. No farewell. There was a scrawled letter on the kitchen table that read, "Don't call me, I'm done." There was no family meal. I took a Greyhound bus to a college 3 states away after depleting my cash and packing a duffel bag. I just needed away, and it wasn't even my first choice. Actual, tangible distance. I slept through the first night in my dorm without squirming at every floorboard creak. There was only silence. No shouting, no slamming doors, no knife blocks within reach. And silence was sufficient for a time. I didn't share my story with my lecturers or roommate. I was so good at putting on a front of normalcy that I almost thought I was normal. To make up for what my scholarships didn't pay for, I worked 2 part-time jobs. Weekend barista and library assistant. And I referred to it as progress when I was too tired to cry. Healing wasn't linear, but therapy finally helped. If a bottle of shampoo made me think of home, I would lose it in the shampoo aisle. I still checked my locks twice, sometimes 3 times, before going to bed because I would freak out at loud noises. On special occasions like holidays or birthdays, my parents would occasionally text, "You are missed. Come spend Thanksgiving at home. Adrian is now doing well." I never answered. I owed them no closure. They referred to it as doing better, but I dubbed it forgetting. They desired to erase the bloodstains from our family's past and act as though nothing had ever occurred. The sensation of cold steel beneath my jaw, however, was something I would never forget. And when I most needed their voices, I couldn't possibly forget the sound of quiet. I remained absent until they gave me an excuse to speak up, which caused everything to fall apart once more. I gazed at my mom's email for 10 minutes before opening it, and the subject line read, "Adrian wants to reconnect." It was unexpected. My throat was dry and my palms were sweating. I was holding my breath, and I was unaware of it. The email was lengthy and extremely well written, as if she had gone through it 5 times to ensure that the wording was perfect. According to her, Adrian had begun volunteering with a local youth group, found faith, and had been sober for more than a year. She compared him to a character from a Hallmark film who only needed another opportunity. The portion that made me physically ill then came. "He's been invited to return home. We think he's really transformed, and he needs a steady environment. We're hoping that this will be an opportunity for our family to come together and mend. Perhaps you might pay us a visit soon. Don't apologize, no recognition." There was a picture of them cuddling in front of the house, my house, the one I fled like it was on fire, and a smiling face emoji, but not even a half-hearted, "We understand if this is hard for you." My head and body seemed to be separated. My vision became hazy. I read that line again and again. He has evolved. Modified? Did the years of gaslighting end because of the change? Was my traumatized adolescent self gone because of the change? I couldn't sleep that night, so I didn't respond. I kept seeing him dining at my old table, in my old bedroom, and moving through the hallways where I used to hide, cry and bleed. They were changing history in real time by allowing my abuser to return. And I was expected to be thankful somehow. Not all the hurt was reopened by that email. I was informed that the infection had persisted. I have no idea why I did that. Perhaps it was anger. Perhaps it was finally exploding after years of stillness. However, I grabbed the phone and dialed their number. My dad responded after 3 rings, his voice as cheerful as if we were reuniting after a trip. I omitted the small talk and said, "Sweetheart, what a surprise. You're letting Adrian move back in?" A pause occurred. Just long enough to feel practiced, but not too long. I heard my mother's voice, soft, syrupy, cautious, suddenly, so I assumed she had picked up the phone. "Honey, listen. He's really changed. You should see him. He's trying so hard." My fingers hurt from clenching the phone so tightly. He held a knife to my throat. A sigh. A long, dramatic sigh, followed by silence. Her words. "We've all made mistakes. But you can't hold on to the past forever." I was having trouble breathing. "I didn't make a mistake, Mom. I was attacked. I was traumatized. And you, both of you, You let him get away with it, again and again. She broke down, or pretended to. You don't understand how hard this is on us. Do you think it was easy watching our family fall apart? We're just trying to rebuild. It struck me like a freight train at that moment. This was not an act of forgiveness, as they put it. As though the past could be neatly paved over like a cracked road, they were referring to it as reconstruction. I didn't shout. I refrained from crying. I've only stated, if you let him back into that house, you'll never hear from me again. My mother's voice became a whisper. Don't be dramatic. You're better than this. I wasn't better, sorry. I was finished, and my hands were shaking as I hung up. But it wasn't out of terror for the first time in a long time. It came from clarity. I received a direct message on Instagram a week after that call. I felt uneasy because the username was so familiar. Adrian was the one. I went cold. Like a landmine, my thumb lingered over the screen. Despite my warning not to open it, curiosity, or perhaps fear, won out. I gave a tap. It wasn't long. Too brief. He concluded with a cheerful face, as if we were old classmates reuniting after a 10-year break. Hey, no hard feelings. We were just dumb kids. I'm in a better place now. Let's talk sometime. Coffee. As if he hadn't torn me to pieces and abandoned me to put myself back together by myself. For what seemed like hours, I sat on my bed and gazed at that message. It was anger, not melancholy, that made my chest tight. We were simply stupid children. When he threatened me with a knife, he was 18. He was 19 when he shoved me over the remote and shattered my ribs. I wasn't a willing participant in some adolescent sibling rivalry, and he wasn't a kid. I went private, but I didn't reply. He was blocked by me. I removed my LinkedIn profile. I erased all evidence of my residence, place of employment, and place of education. I became acutely aware of how simple it would be for him to locate me if he so desired. However, the message was more than just nerve-wracking. It provided clarification. He was still the same. It was still manipulation and erasure, even though he had recently acquired new skills, softer words and a more composed tone. And perhaps I didn't need to sour relations if my parents were prepared to welcome him back. Perhaps I was done surviving and needed to create a new road, one that they couldn't follow. I was going to get up now. Adrian's message caused a change in me. Not loudly, not right away. I didn't bother tying up the loose thread so it unraveled quietly. I didn't publish a theatrical tirade or yell. I simply deleted myself. Without alerting anyone but my best buddy, I moved out of my shared apartment, changed my phone number, and deleted old email accounts. I even submitted documentation to officially alter a portion of my name. Just enough to make me more difficult to track down, nothing too extreme. I stopped following them on social media. I ceased to envision reconciliation. I gave up expecting excuses that would never come. It was survival, not retaliation. It was referred to as strategic no contact by my therapist. It was the first time I named it breathing. I obtained a new job doing freelance design work for a startup with no corporate ties in a location I had never even been to before. I paid with cash wherever possible, traveled sparingly, and worked remotely. I went into ghost mode in real life, leaving no digital traces behind. And I felt stronger with each stride I walked away from them. There were times when I wondered whether I was being unkind, or if I was becoming into the antagonist in their tale, and I would spend those nights staring at my ceiling. However, I would then recall the knife, the silence, the cold linoleum beneath my back, and the antiseptic odor in the emergency room. Not that I was being mean. For once, I was selecting myself. And I vowed to myself while I sat in a little room above a coffee shop in a city where nobody recognized who I was. I would make sure that the only image of me they would ever see again was on their screens if they wanted to forget what had happened. I wish I could say that optimism or hope helped me rebuild myself. However, I didn't. I created myself out of resentment, furious. I had a burning need to show that I was more than the timid, afraid girl they had left behind. I signed up for night classes in marketing strategy, digital design, and branding. I studied till dawn while working 11-hour days. I took on jobs that no one wanted. Like creating logos for bands that would never make it, awful websites for dubious clients, and social media audits for customers who paid with Starbucks gift cards. After I agreed to everything, things gradually started to alter. I met a woman who is the founder of a sustainable startup through a client's acquaintance. She urgently required a complete branding package. To deliver it, I remained up 3 nights in a row. One of the biggest eco-tech blogs appreciated my work when she first began. More contracts, more clients, and more revenue resulted from that. I opened my own digital consultancy when I was 25. I had two part-time workers at the age of 26, and I was highlighted in a design magazine as the unsung hero of up-and-coming companies. I couldn't help but notice the irony, the silent power. All my life, they had referred to me as quiet, and now that quiet had turned into my superpower. I never did, however, contact my parents. They were not unblocked by me. I didn't soften because I always saw Adrian smiling in their kitchen when I considered sending a postcard or a holiday text. I imagined my mother embracing him. I imagined my father calling it forgiveness while shaking his hand. They might have a family of their own. I had a goal, not retaliation, and I was developing something else. And I grinned as I glanced out at the audience as I took the stage for my first speaking engagement, which was a conference with 600 business executives. What it took for me to stand there would never be known to them. However, I did. It was meant to be one of my proudest evenings ever. I, the girl who previously hid in toilet stalls to avoid her brother's taunting, was invited to appear as the keynote speaker at a major design expo. Wearing a navy blazer gave me a sense of importance. My speech was tight, my slides were prepared, and my hair was curled. The lights in the auditorium went down. My name appeared on a huge screen. Then I saw them when I went outside to talk. My parents, dead center, third row. I felt like I might collapse since my stomach fell so much. I honestly thought for a moment that I was having hallucinations. However, no. My dad was there, adjusting his tie. My mother gripped her handbag as if it were a prize. A copy of the event program with my face emblazoned on the front was also in the vacant seat next to them, which I could only presume they had kept. They had unexpectedly and without invitation arrived to watch me. I was blinded by the lights. The audience cheered. All I could do was keep moving forward. I delivered the entire speech. Everything I wrote at 3 a.m. And my eyes watering. Every story about constructing your identity out of rejection's debris. People chuckled. A few people sobbed. However, I never looked into their eyes. A staff member then handed me a tiny envelope while we shook hands and posed for pictures. Some folks said they were family, he clarified, asked me to pass this along. Handwritten on flowered stationery, the note read, "We're so proud of you. Let's put the past behind us. Love, Mom and Dad." No, Adrian, don't apologize. Just a broad, fictitious gesture of peace. I went outside, sat in my heels on the curb, and sobbed more intensely than I had in a long time. They still believed that this story was about them, not because they appeared. I sent an article to a well-known online magazine 4 weeks following the exhibition. I didn't mention names, but the title was "Success is Not Forgiveness." I didn't make fun of them in public. I didn't even bring up the police report or the knife. However, I exposed my journey's reality, the psychological cost of being pushed to recover while those who hurt me applauded from the sidelines, and of being required to forgive those who never accepted responsibility. The article went viral. Thousands of comments were left by strangers and others, telling tales of survivors who created empires out of silence, families that ignored suffering, and parents who stood up for abusers. One comment rang like gospel in my mind. You don't owe anyone access to the healed version of you they refused to help build. The article was seen by my parents. I know this because a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent me a message 3 days later. It read, "Your mom is devastated. She said you've twisted everything." Twisted. I had only spoken the truth, the unvarnished truth, not the edited family photo version they had selected for the holidays. I knew then that I didn't require their apology. I didn't need them to confess, to get down on their knees, or to plead for forgiveness. All I had to do was release the invisible thread that had bound me to their acceptance. And I did. The cousin's message was archived by me. Then, with a glass of wine in hand, I sat on the balcony of my apartment and gazed at the city lights as though they were mine now, because they were, in a sense. I had no desire for vengeance. Freedom was what I want. And this was the sensation at last. I rang the opening bell at NASDAQ 8 months later. Me. Only me. As my firm went public, I stood there in a fitted white suit, flashing on screens all over the nation. The cameras made a sound. Reporters yelled inquiries. On the stage was a bunch of white roses, not from my family but from my team. People who came to me in person. No tears came to my eyes when the confetti fell. I didn't, even though I believed I would. I simply stood there and took in the moment as if it were pure oxygen, free of the odor of guilt. That evening, 3 networks broadcast a news story titled, "Youngest Solo Female Founder to IPO in Her Sector." They mentioned my name as if it were important. They saw it, I knew. They witnessed it, but I'm not sure if they saw it live, saw it replayed, or read about it in one of the business publications my dad used to gather on the kitchen table like sacred books. They were forced to. I picture them swooping in while halting the screen. In a whisper, my mother said, "She looks so grown up." My father remarked, "We always knew she'd do big things." Number. They didn't. They were skilled at keeping me quiet. The son who almost destroyed me was protected by them. They were adept at writing letters, showing up without permission, and acting like they were involved in the tale, but they had no idea how to see me. Not at all. Currently, the only version of me that they would ever see again would be on screens, in magazines, and in stories that they were unable to edit, a version that they were unable to reach, alter, or embrace into submission. The door didn't need to be slammed in their faces. All I had to do was construct a stage that they would never be able to enter. And I wasn't afraid when I silenced them. It was liberty. My parents skipped my wedding to join my sister's yacht proposal. 3 years later, they saw my face on a highway billboard, and begged to meet. The morning of my wedding dawned with a sky so flawlessly blue that it appeared to be created specifically for us. Sunlight shone through the windows of our small venue, a refurbished old barn in Lancaster County that Ethan Monroe and I had fell in love with right away. I stood alone in the bridal room, my wedding gown hanging from a wooden beam. The lace detail captured the light in ways that made me stop and enjoy it. Despite the hollowness in my chest, my phone remained quiet on the vanity. No missed calls or new messages. I'd known for 4 weeks that my parents and sister wouldn't be attending. Mom had contacted me as I was finalizing the meal with our caterer. Her voice had that particular tone, which she utilized when delivering news that she considered inconvenient rather than catastrophic. "Rachel, honey, I don't think we can make it to your wedding." The caterer had stared at me as I tightened my grasp on the phone. "What do you mean you can't make it?" "It's in 4 weeks. Lily's boyfriend plans to propose next month. They're heading to Miami for the weekend, and we offered to assist with some of the arrangements." "You promised to help with arrangements for a proposal that hasn't even happened yet, instead of attending your own daughter's wedding." The words had tasted terrible as they left my mouth. Do not be theatrical. Ryan's family controls the financial business, and they are quite fussy about traditions. His parents are hiring a yacht for the proposal weekend and have encouraged us to participate. It would be impolite to decline. The caterer softly excused herself from the table. I scarcely noticed. "So, you're skipping my wedding, my actual wedding, for a proposal that may not even materialize. For Lily's boyfriend's parents, whom you've only seen twice." "3 times, my mom corrected. "And don't act silly. Of course, he will propose. He had already showed us the ring. It's 5 carats, Rachel. 5. Besides, your wedding is quite basic. Ethan's parents are already footing the majority of the costs, right? Simple." She spoke it as if it were embarrassing. Ethan and I had planned everything ourselves, paid for much of it, and decided what was important to us. Yes, his parents had helped. They'd insisted on covering the venue, but they'd done it out of genuine enthusiasm for our selections, not the thinly veiled displeasure my family couldn't hide. Ethan's parents are supportive of our decisions. They are not purchasing our wedding. My mother had sighed. "I don't see why you are so unhappy." "This is not surprising, Rachel. You have always done things your way, despite our recommendations. If you dated Ryan when he expressed interest in you before Lily, you could have gotten the boat proposal." The memory of that talk seared as I stood alone in the bridal suite. Margaret, Ethan's mother, tapped lightly before entering, her smile warm as she brought in a tray of fresh pastries and coffee. "The makeup artist will be here in 20 minutes. I thought you might like breakfast." She hesitated, observing my look. "Rachel, honey, what is wrong?" "Nothing," I said with a forced smile. "Just wedding day jitters." Margaret set the package down and grasped my hands in hers. "What about your parents?" I nodded, unable to speak with the knot in my throat. "I'm really sorry," she replied, squeezing my hands. "But I want you to know how happy Thomas and I are to have you join our family." We couldn't have imagined a finer mate for Ethan. The ceremony was magnificent in its intimacy, with 60 attendees rather than the intended 64. Ethan's eyes welled up with tears as I walked down the aisle on his father's arm. When Thomas realized that my father would not be attending, he insisted on accompanying me. Hannah and Sophie, my college friends, served as my bridesmaids, while Marcus, Ethan's brother, was best man. We exchanged vows under a wooden arch decorated with wildflowers and fairy lights. The reception included local farm-to-table cuisine, craft beer from Ethan's favorite brewery, and a playlist that we spent weeks creating. We danced under strings of market lights with others who had decided to join us in celebrating. Even with the vacant chairs at the head table, everything was excellent. The honeymoon in Maine had been an ideal vacation. Ethan and I spent a week in a seaside cabin near Bar Harbor, trekking around Acadia National Park by day and falling asleep to the sound of waves at night. We fully withdrew from our phones, social media, and family drama. For 7 days, it was just us, laying the groundwork for our marriage free of external pressures and expectations. Mary Ann, the owner of the cottage, was a silver-haired artist who resided there all year. She'd taken a liking to us right away, sharing local secrets that tourists rarely knew about. A hidden cove with tide pools teeming with starfish, a family-owned bakery that made wild blueberry pies from berries picked that morning, and a secluded cliff path with views that stretched to Canada on clear days. "You two have something special," she told us one evening when we drank a bottle of wine on her porch. The sunset illuminated the sky in vivid oranges and pinks, which reflected off the calm water of the bay. "I've been watching couples pass through here for 30 years. I know which ones will last." "What is our secret?" Ethan inquired, his fingers interlocked with mine. Mary Ann grinned as the lines around her eyes deepened. "You look at each other as equals. Some couples have one person continually gazing up and the other looking down. Never worked." She held up her glass and waved toward us. "You two though. Eye to eye." Her remarks resonated with me during our visit. Eye to eye, equal. It was everything. My parents' marriage was not everything. My bond with my family has never existed. Mary Ann pushed a tiny box into my hands on our last morning in Maine. "Wedding gift," she explained. "Open it when you need reminding." I placed the item into my bag, meaning to unwrap it when we arrived home. 3 days after returning from our honeymoon, I received an SMS from my sister. There were no congrats, no queries about the wedding or honeymoon, just a snapshot of a huge diamond ring on her finger and the words, "He proposed." "Mom and Dad hired a yacht with Ryan's family for the entire weekend. We're thinking about a June wedding at the Hamilton estate. Save the date." The anguish that went through me was shockingly tangible, causing a constriction in my chest and difficulty breathing. Despite skipping my wedding to prepare for this particular occasion, they couldn't even acknowledge what they'd done. No apologies, no wish you could have been there, just celebration, and the assumption that I would play my part in Lily's beautiful life narrative. I gazed at my phone screen for a few minutes before placing it face down on the kitchen counter of our new apartment. Ethan found me later, still standing in the same location. "Lily got engaged," I announced frankly. He threw his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "Are you all right?" "They rented a yacht, Ethan. My parents, who were unable to attend their own daughter's wedding, leased a boat for my sister's engagement." "I'm so sorry, Rach." I twisted in his arms, suddenly recalling Mary Ann's box. "Wait here." I pulled the little gift from my bag, which was still partially unpacked from our trip. Unwrapping it carefully, I discovered a hand-painted stone within. On one side, there was an exquisite compass rose. On the other hand, phrases are painted in exquisite script. "The direction of your life is always your choice." A letter slipped behind the stone stated, "The most meaningful journeys frequently begin with walking away. Trust your compass." I returned to the kitchen, clutching the stone. Ethan stood where I had left him, concerned expression on his face. "No," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I'm done apologizing. I'm done hoping they'll change." As I spoke, memories poured back. Years of differing treatment between me and my sister were crystal obvious. When Lily turned 17, my parents presented her with a new automobile. When I turned 17 a year ago, I was given driving lessons and told I needed to save for my own car. For my high school graduation, they threw a little supper at their home. They leased a space and invited 55 people to Lily's graduation the next year. At every point the pattern was consistent. What Lily received for free, I had to earn or go without. "They've shown me who they are my entire life," I said, my voice more stable than I expected. "I just refuse to believe it." Ethan gripped my hands, his eyes steadfast. "Whatever you decide, I am with you. But make sure you're doing it for the proper reasons. Self-respect, not anger." His knowledge touched me greatly. This was not about penalizing them. It was about preserving myself. About making room for a life in which I wasn't always trying for unattainable acceptance. That evening, I wrote a quick email to my parents. "I've spent years hoping to get your approval and attention. I've excused your actions and blamed myself for not being good enough. I can't do it anymore. I need room to create a life in which I am valued. Please do not contact me for a time. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Rachel. I sent Lily a similar note, congratulating her on her engagement but explaining that I would not be attending her wedding. Then I banned their numbers, deleted them off my social media, and focused on the future I was creating with Ethan. The early days of separation were more difficult than I had imagined. Habits acquired over decades do not go suddenly. I found myself reaching for my phone to communicate good news before realizing there was no purpose. Unexpected surges of sadness would wash over me at unexpected times, not for what I'd lost, but for something that never existed in the first place. Unconditional familial support. Ethan recommended treatment. Rach, this is a significant life shift. Having someone impartial to talk to might help. I first resisted. My family had always viewed therapy as paying strangers to hear your issues. However, the voice in my brain was just what I needed to leave. Dr. Lauren Hayes, a family systems specialist with experience in adult children navigating complex family relationships, was recommended to me by our insurance provider. What you're describing is a common pattern, she explained during our third session. Golden child versus scapegoat dynamics. It's not about who you are, but the roles you've been allocated. I don't feel like a scapegoat, I protested. They never blamed me for anything. The scapegoat isn't always blamed, she added. Sometimes they're just the one who's expected to accommodate, to understand, to make do with less. The one whose needs are secondary. Her remarks shed light on a lifetime of experiences, how I'd learnt to ignore my own demands, to cherish Lily's times in the spotlight while minimizing my own failures. How I had accepted the notion that desiring more was selfish, and that I should be content with whatever attention came my way. Your decision to step back does not mean you are abandoning them, Dr. Hayes explained. It's refusing to engage in a dynamic that causes you harm. That is healthy. Through weekly sessions, I began to unravel the intricate web of family conditioning. Some days brought up righteous, purifying wrath, which burnt away years of self-doubt. Other days brought such deep despair that it felt bottomless. However, the emotional storms became less frequent and severe, leaving way for something new. Possibility. Ethan and I developed routines that supported our relationship. Sunday morning walks in local state parks, cooking ambitious meals together on Wednesday nights, and a monthly adventure day where we'd travel somewhere new within a 3-hour radius. We created customs that were entirely ours, free of familial expectations. His parents, Margaret and Thomas, asked us to supper every other Friday. Unlike my family's formal gatherings, when discussions were staged and judgments were veiled as care, these dinners were casual, with real attention and easy laughing. Margaret never compared Ethan to his brother Marcus, never implying that one was more valued than the other. Thomas talked about both of his boys with equal pride. You seem different here, Ethan said as we drove home from one such evening. Be more easygoing. I'm not bracing for judgment, I said loudly. With my family, I always felt like I was auditioning for approval. Lily sent me an email 4 months into our family separation. It had gotten over my blocks by coming from her work address. Rachel, I don't comprehend what's going on. Mom and Dad will not discuss why you are not speaking to them. They only say you need room. My wedding is in 4 months and my maid of honor position is vacant. You are my sister. Whatever they did, please do not penalize me for it. Lils. The email revealed so much in its silence. She thought our parents were at blame without knowing the specifics, indicating a trend she recognized. Nonetheless, she wanted me to play my assigned position in her life, regardless of my sentiments. I wrote and erased 5 different replies before deciding on honesty. Lils, I am not punishing you. I'm making room to recover from patterns that have harmed me for years. The different treatment we've received isn't your fault, but I can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. I hope your wedding is all you imagined. I hope Ryan makes you happy, but I will not be going. I need this limit right now. Perhaps one day we will be able to create a relationship as equals, rather than as golden child and shadow sister. Rachel. She didn't respond. I later learnt from mutual contacts that she had requested her college roommate to serve as maid of honor. Their wedding images appeared in a regional lifestyle magazine, with my parents beaming in the front row and the banquet at the Hamilton estate being as opulent as imagined. I felt a tingle of something as I scrolled through the web galleries. But it was not remorse. It was realization of how divergent our paths had become. Meanwhile, my own route took unforeseen turns. 4 months later, the startup incubation program approved my application. While working on my MBA, I created a company concept for customizable subscription wellness boxes that integrated Eastern and Western approaches to health. The notion began as a graduate school passion project to deal with the burden of studies and family disappointment. Years ago, during my undergraduate studies in biochemistry and commerce, I had an idea. My roommate Hannah had chronic fatigue syndrome, so I saw firsthand the limitations of traditional treatment. Doctors administered drug after medication, each relieving isolated symptoms but without addressing the underlying imbalance. Hannah, frustrated with their approach, began looking into alternative therapies such as acupuncture, adaptogenic medicines, and nutritional therapy. Western medicine sees the body as separate systems, she told me one night as we sat cross-legged on her dorm room floor, going through her increasing supplement collection. Eastern medicine sees everything as connected. I was originally suspicious. My scientific classes focused on empirical data, controlled investigations, and medicinal remedies. However, observing Hannah progressively regain her vitality through this integrated method piqued my interest in healing practices that my education had previously ignored. My grandma, May, had planted the seeds much earlier. She was born in Phagan Province and immigrated to America in her 20s, where she kept her traditional rituals while also adopting features of Western culture. As a youngster, I spent summers with her, enthralled by her medical cabinet, which had prescription bottles as well as fascinating jars of dried herbs, roots and mushrooms. Balance, she'd say in her affected English, showing me how to make ginger tea for my upset stomach rather than going for Pepto-Bismol. The body understands how to cure itself. We simply remind it. My parents endured her old-fashioned medicines with hardly veiled disgust. "Mom, she needs real medicine," my father would urge whenever I became unwell during visits. My grandma would grin, stand aside for pharmaceutical solutions, and then hand me her teas and tonics while winking conspiratorially. After she died when I was 15, I acquired her remedy diary, which had handwritten notes in a combination of Mandarin and English chronicling generations of healing expertise. I kept it secret because I knew my parents would dismiss it as superstitious rubbish. But, throughout college and beyond, I found myself returning to those pages, particularly during times of stress or sickness. My Zenita Wellness Company concept arose from a convergence of elements, with my biochemistry background giving scientific insight, my grandmother's traditional wisdom offering alternative techniques, and my business degree providing the foundation to properly combine them. The approach included tailored supplement regimens, adaptogenic herbs, targeted instructional components, and optional telemedicine nutrition delivery methods, consultations. Each subscription box would be created based on a thorough intake evaluation that addressed individual health objectives and concerns using a combination of evidence-based remedies from many healing traditions. My MBA teachers were thrilled about the notion, but my family disregarded it as just another of my unrealistic ideas. Dad had pushed me into corporate finance, where he had contacts. Mom proposed pharmaceutical sales, claiming it was near enough to my interests, but with real money. "The wellness space is overcrowded," my father asserted during a heated dinner conversation. "And these diverse methods are simply trends. In 5 years they will move on to the next trend." "It's not a trend, Dad," I responded. "It represents a fundamental change in how people see health. Integrative medicine programs are being launched at major hospitals. Insurance companies are beginning to pay alternative therapies. Rachel always needs to be different," my mother had moaned to Lily, as if we weren't sharing a table. "Remember when she insisted on studying biochemistry instead of communications, as we suggested?" Lily, a communications major at the time, grinned. "Not everyone can handle the hard sciences, Mom." The discourse had degenerated from there, with my evidence-based arguments disregarded as stubbornness and my enthusiasm misinterpreted as disobedience. I'd left that meal with a familiar heaviness, the weight of being misunderstood by those closest to me. Ethan believed in me entirely. He assisted me with the company strategy, sat up late talking marketing techniques, and urged me to apply to the incubator program. His encouragement never wavered, even after I was turned down by the first 2 programs I applied to. "Those rejections aren't about your concept," he said after the second dismal email. "They are about fit and timing. The correct application will identify what you are creating." He had been correct. The third submission, to a program particularly dedicated to health innovation, had touched the perfect chord. The acceptance email arrived on a Tuesday morning when I was working at my consulting job, a practical employment I'd accepted after college to save money. I phoned Ethan immediately. "They've accepted us. $20,000 in startup money, plus 8 months of coaching." "I knew they would," he said, his voice assured and pleasant. "This is just the beginning, Rach. The program demanded a full-time commitment, so I would have to resign my consulting employment." The concept scared me. My parents' voices rang in my mind. Irresponsible. Risky. Bullish. For a brief moment, I considered reaching for my phone to seek their advice, a reaction resulting from decades of indoctrination. Instead, I phoned Dr. Hayes to schedule an emergency session. "What is keeping you back?" she inquired after I had described my situation. "Financial worries, practical reasons, or the dread of proving them correct if you fail?" Her question emphasized the internal struggle. "The last one," I confessed. "If this doesn't work, they'll see it as confirmation that they were right about me all along." "What if it does work?" she challenged. "Will they see that as validation that they were wrong?" I laughed without humor. "Perhaps not. They'll either claim they've always backed me, or try to minimize it. So their opinion cannot be the deciding factor," she stated. "It's a no-win scenario if that's your metric for success." She was correct. I hadn't had direct touch with my family in months, but I was still instinctively seeking their approval, and fearing their judgment. True independence means making judgments based on my own beliefs and assessments, rather than reacting to their expectations. I tendered notice at my consulting business the next day. My supervisor, Angela, showed real disappointment at losing me, but offered to link me with possible investors. "Rachel, your notion has legs. With the correct support, you may truly revolutionize the wellness sector." 3 days later, I signed the incubation program documents. That evening, Ethan surprised me with a celebratory supper on our apartment balcony, complete with string lights, champagne, and takeaway from our favorite Ethiopian restaurant. "To Zanita Wellness," he said, his eyes mirroring the glittering lights. "And to my brilliant, brave wife who's about to change how people think about health." As we clinked glasses, I felt a deep feeling of connection to myself, my values, and my vision. For the first time in my life, I was not torn between who I was and who others expected me to be. The relief was amazing. The following 8 months were a flurry of 16-hour workdays, prototype development, market research, and non-stop meetings. Ethan took on extra photography projects to augment our income while I established the basis for Zanita Wellness. The name combines Zen with the final 3 letters of my grandmother's name, May. By the end of the incubation program, we had raised an additional $300,000 in angel funding, completed our supply chain, and released a beta version of our platform with 250 test clients. The reaction was highly good. After the second month, our client retention rate had reached 90%, which was nearly double the industry average. 20 months after our inception, we raised $2.5 million in Series A investment. By then, our subscription base had surpassed 60,000 users. 7 months later, after being highlighted in Women's Health, Forbes 30 Under 30, and other major morning shows, our subscriber base grew to 85,000. As we approached our 4-year anniversary, Zanita was expanding faster than we had planned. Ethan came up with the idea for the billboard ad. "We should celebrate hitting 120,000 subscribers with something bold," he proposed during a rare weekend excursion to the Finger Lakes. "We've been so consumed with the business that we've barely taken time to process our success." "Billboards are expensive," I argued, but the concept piqued my interest. "An old-school move for a digital-first company." "Sometimes old school cuts through the noise," Ethan explained, refilling our wine cups. "Also, your narrative is compelling. A female entrepreneur, an original concept, and rapid development. In important marketplaces, your face should stand 40 feet tall." I chuckled, but promised to talk about it with our marketing staff. They quickly fell in love with the notion. We designed a set of 5 billboards in important areas around the Northeast, with a basic design, my image with our motto, Wellness Reimagined, and the Zanita logo and website. The Philadelphia billboard was the first to go up, carefully placed on I-90 so that commuters, particularly those commuting between my hometown and the suburbs where my parents still resided, would not miss it. I didn't intend it as a statement to my family. They were no longer on my radar. In the 3 years after we lost communication, I'd moved on from worrying if they ever thought of me. The hollow aching had gradually become filled with purpose, accomplishment, and true connection. Ethan and I had created a household full of laughter and mutual respect. We discovered our people, friends who showed up, celebrated our wins, and helped us overcome disappointments. Angela from my previous consultancy position had become a close friend and informal advisor. Hannah and Sophie stayed consistent throughout my life. Ethan's parents treated me as a daughter, not an afterthought. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, while I was discussing quarterly predictions with our CFO, Claire. My assistant, Brooke, knocked on my office door with an especially agitated countenance. "I apologize for interrupting, but there's a woman on line 1 who insists on speaking with you. She says she is your mother." My hand froze on the worksheet I'd been annotating. Claire glanced between Brooke and me, perceiving a sudden shift in energy. "Should I tell her you are unavailable?" Brooke inquired, already reaching for the door. I took a big breath. No, I will accept it. Claire, can we do this in an hour? After they departed, I gazed at my desk phone's flashing light for almost a minute before picking up the receiver. This is Rachel Monroe. After our wedding, I took Ethan's surname, cutting off my final official tie to my family of origin. Rachel, it's Mom. Her voice sounded precisely the same, yet strangely foreign after 3 years of stillness. I know. I maintained a neutral, professional tone, as if she were just another business contact. We noticed the billboard on our way to Lily's house yesterday. Your father almost drove off the road. She let out a short, hesitant laugh that faded swiftly in the quiet. Is that why you've called? To discuss my company's marketing strategy? Oh, of course not. We're phoning because... Her voice cracked. Rachel, why didn't you tell us? What about your own family? We had to figure out from a billboard that you're a wealthy entrepreneur now. The boldness of her inquiry took my breath away for a second. 3 years of quiet, followed by a lifetime of conditional love. What did she expect? Was a press release delivered to their home? Despite their apparent lack of interest, do they provide regular updates on my achievements? I did tell you, I eventually said. For years, I've told you about my hobbies, aspirations, and vision. You were not interested. That is not fair. We always wanted the best for you. No, you wanted what was simplest to comprehend and boast about. Lily's fiancé's family's affluence is easy to grasp. My enthusiasm for integrative wellness is too intricate and hazardous. Rachel, please. We've missed you dearly. You departed from our lives with no explanation. For 3 years, there have been no calls or visits. Then you find yourself on a huge billboard. Do you understand how that feels as a mother? I closed my eyes and imagined the scene. Their surprise at seeing my face above the highway. The hurried explanation to whoever they were with, and the frenzied Googling of my firm name once they arrived at Lily's house. Had they been so amazed, bewildered, or ashamed that they had no idea about my success? How did you feel about skipping my wedding for Lily's proposal weekend? I asked gently. What was it like to charter a boat for her engagement but not attend my wedding? The line was silent for a few seconds. We made a mistake, she eventually conceded. We should have been there. Yes, you should have. The words came out more calmly than I intended. Mom, that wasn't a one-time error. It was the conclusion of a lifelong practice of being second choice. That is not true. We adore both of our girls equally. Please don't lie to me. Not now. She was silent again. Your father and I want to make amends, she replied finally. We want to be a part of your life again. Can we meet someplace and discuss face to face? Part of me wanted to deny, to preserve the quiet I'd established. But another part, the one that had finally grown confident in her own value, was prepared to confront them on new terms. I have a lunch opening next Thursday, I replied. There is a cafe near my office called Eastwood. 1:30. We'll be there, she pledged, her voice filled with optimism. Should we bring Lily? She's also been inquiring about you. No, I said firmly. Just you and Dad for now. After hanging up, I sat still, taking in the talk. Ethan would be concerned when I informed him, protective of me and fearful of the suffering my family may cause, but he would back any decision I chose. That assurance seemed like a protection against whatever may come next. Eastwood Cafe was located on the ground level of a restored manufacturing building, 4 blocks from Zenita's headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in plenty of natural light, while exposed brick walls and wooden beams protected the space's industrial past. I had purposefully picked a neutral area that was near enough to my office for me to feel safe on my own soil. I arrived 20 minutes early and chose a corner table that provided solitude without isolation. Brooke had cleared my calendar for the afternoon, assuming without explanation that I may require time later. My parents entered at precisely 1:30 p.m., scouring the cafe until they saw me. They appeared older than I recalled, with Dad's hair grayer and Mom's face more lined. They approached me with similar faces of apprehension, as if approaching a stranger who resembled someone they previously knew. Dad murmured, "Rachel," as they approached the table. He bent down hesitantly, uncertain whether to hug me. I stood and extended my hand instead. He shook it, amazement on his face. Mom made no such pretense, drawing me into an embrace that I neither reciprocated nor rejected. "You look wonderful," she added, taking a step back to assess me. "Success suits you." We ordered lunch, a ritual that gave structure to an otherwise chaotic interaction. Small chat got us through the wait for our food. Benign comments about the weather, the cafe's industrial decor, and the quality of the coffee. Finally, as we finished eating, Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother and I owe you an apology," the man said. "We should have attended your wedding. There is no justification for missing it, and I am profoundly embarrassed of our decision." His candor astonished me. Dad had seldom confessed wrongdoing during my youth. "We've done a lot of thinking over these past 3 years," my mother said, "about the type of parents we were to you versus Lily. We didn't see it then, but looking back." She twisted the napkin between her fingers. "We preferred her. We made justifications for treating you differently, but that's how it was." "Why?" The inquiry vanished before I could decide if I wanted to hear their response. They exchanged looks, a form of wordless communication I'd seen many times as a child, always feeling excluded from their inner language. "Lily was easier," Dad acknowledged. "She wanted what we understood: status, security, traditional success. You've always pushed the boundaries," Mom continued. "I questioned everything. You wanted to build your own way. That terrified us. So you just didn't," I remarked quietly. "No, we didn't," Dad confirmed. "And we missed out on knowing an extraordinary daughter because of it." The approval I had been seeking for so long came with a startling emptiness. I had already established my life without their consent. Receiving it now was like getting a map after finishing a voyage. "Tell me about your company," Mom replied with real interest in her voice. The billboard advertised Wellness Reimagined. "So, what exactly does that mean?" I spent the next 30 minutes explaining Zenita's objective, our development trajectory, and my vision for the future. They listened with an attentiveness I had never seen from them before, asking meaningful questions that showed they had researched my sector before to our encounter. "We're so proud of you," Dad added after I finished. "What you've built is remarkable." "Thank you," I said, the words strange on my tongue, accepting their pride after years of seeking it. "We'd like to be a part of your life again, Rachel," Mom replied, reaching across the table but not touching my hand. I examined their expressions: hope, remorse, and an unaccustomed humility. "I'm not the same person you knew," I informed them. "I won't shrink myself to fit your expectations anymore." "We don't want you to," Dad said. "We want to know who you really are." "I can't promise anything," I explained gently. "But I am prepared to try a limited reunion. Holidays are still off the menu. There have been no family reunions with Lily yet. Maybe coffee once a month and see how it works." Relief poured across their cheeks. They had evidently expected absolute rejection. "We'll take whatever you're willing to give," Mom murmured quietly. As we were about to go, Dad paused. "There is something more. We watched the interviews you gave about your grandmother's impact on your company concept. May's Cures, her notebooks." I nodded, curious where he was headed with this. "After you stopped communicating, we cleared up the attic. We discovered a box of her belongings that your grandpa sent after her death. We were unable to read several more journals, some of which were written in Chinese, old photos and letters. We thought you might want them." My throat clenched. "You've kept her notebooks all these time?" "We didn't know they existed until recently," Mom quickly added. "Your grandfather sent them when he moved into an assisted living facility. They've been in storage for years." Dad dug inside his briefcase and took out a business envelope. "Here's the key to the storage unit we lease downtown. Everything of hers is present. Take it when you are ready." I took the envelope, my fingers quivering slightly. "Thank you." Outside the cafe, we exchanged uncomfortable half-hugs and promised to stay in touch. I watched them stroll toward the parking garage, their shoulders less tense than when they first came. Instead of going back to the office, I called Ethan. "How did it go?" he inquired instantly. "Better than I had imagined. Different from what I expected." As I headed toward our apartment, I summed up our chat. "They uncovered more of Grandma May's journals. Ones I've never seen before." "Wow." Ethan understood what I meant. "Are you going to look at them today?" "No, not yet. I need to process the meeting first." I paused at a crossing, watching folks pass by. They seemed genuinely regretful, Ethan, and interested in Zenita in a way they never were in my ideas before. "People can change," he remarked quietly. "Especially when forced to face the consequences of their choices." That's it. I'm not sure if they changed, or I did. Maybe both. The crossing light changed, and I entered the roadway. 2 years ago, their acceptance would have meant the world. Now, it's simply nice. Unexpected but not necessary. Because you've proven your worth to yourself, Ethan answered. Wasn't that always part of the journey? Not convincing them, but convincing yourself. I grinned, a warm glow pouring through me from his understanding. When did you become so wise? I married an incredible woman who teaches me something new every day. That evening, Ethan and I sat on our balcony, drinking a bottle of wine and watching the city lights appear as twilight fell. I detailed every aspect of the lunch encounter, examining their words, body language, and things left unsaid. Do you think you'll ever be fully reconciled with them? Ethan asked. I thought about the question thoroughly. I do not know. I am not sure what entirely reconciled might look like right now. We cannot erase the past. No, but you can create a different future. Maybe a careful one, with boundaries. I swirled the wine in my glass, watching it reflect the light. The craziest aspect is understanding I don't need their approval anymore. I did not put up the billboard that attracted their notice. I did not create Zanita to prove them incorrect. I did it for myself. And that's why you succeeded, Ethan remarked, lifting his glass. To building a life on your terms. I clinked my glass with his. To the choices that led me here. Later following week I went to the storage unit alone. The box holding my grandmother's stuff lay in the midst of the otherwise vacant space. A medium-sized trunk with brass fittings, and her name written on the side in faded gold lettering. Inside, I discovered 14 diaries wrapped in fading leather, images I had never seen before, letters exchanged with practitioners all over the world, and cures passed down through generations. The finding felt like reclaiming a lost piece of me. One of the images I'd never seen before showed my grandma proudly standing outside a little clinic in Fogan Province, clad in a white coat and with a stethoscope around her neck. The back included an inscription in precise Mandarin characters, which I carefully interpreted using my rusty language abilities. Mei Lin, an integrative medicine practitioner since 1965. My parents constantly talked about integrative medicine, not simply traditional Chinese medicine. She'd been using the identical method I'm currently basing my business on for decades, before Western healthcare recognized its benefits. Another shot showed her with a group of Western physicians, all smiling as they stood in front of a sign that said, East-West Medical Exchange Program. I spent hours in that storage unit, surrounded by my grandmother's history, putting together a tale that my parents had either never heard or had purposefully minimized. Mei Lin wasn't only a traditional healer who stuck to archaic practices, as they had depicted her. She'd been a pioneer in integrative medicine, regarded enough to engage in foreign exchange programs, and trained in both Eastern and Western methods. Among her documents, I discovered communication with American medical schools, letters from research institutes looking for her expertise, and even a draft of a textbook chapter she had contributed to before moving. My grandmother, whom my parents had quietly disregarded as old-fashioned, had been an innovator, a link between healing traditions. Tears flowed down my cheeks as I realized what Mom had sacrificed by coming to America. She'd sacrificed professional reputation, academic connections, and meaningful employment to provide her children, including my father, with opportunities that she thought they couldn't have in China at the time. Had my father ever known who his mother really was? Had he grasped the breadth of her expertise, the reputation she'd earned in her field? Or had he, like so many other children of immigrants, simply seen the parts of her that didn't fit into American life? In the oldest diary, written partly in Mandarin and partly in meticulous English, I discovered a sentence that felt destined for me, despite being written decades before my birth. The path to recovery is seldom straight. It winds through valleys of uncertainty, across mountains of resistance, and across rivers of dread. But with each stride, the healer gains strength. The genuine healing lies in the trip itself, in learning to trust what others cannot see. I stroked my fingers over my grandmother's calligraphy, feeling a bond that transcended time and familial divisions. Her insight helped me when my parents couldn't. Her confidence in holistic care impacted my vision, even when others denied it. I carefully packed my tote bag with the most immediately relevant materials, journals, pictures and letters documenting her professional triumphs. The remainder would need to be carefully archived, but these items would accompany me home tonight. Ethan was waiting when I arrived, having cooked supper but not wanting to disrupt my discovery process with phone calls or texting. His eyes widened as I put the images out on our dining table. She was amazing, Ethan. Not only a conventional healer, as my parents constantly said, she practiced integrative medicine before it was even a recognized discipline here. My voice quivered with passion. She was exactly what they've criticized me for trying to become. He perused the images, letters and diary entries I had translated for him. Does this affect everything for Zanita? I nodded, my thoughts racing with possibilities. We're not simply expanding on a notion, we're carrying on a heritage. These papers contain techniques she created, combinations she tried, and approaches she refined over the years. That night I was unable to sleep. I stayed on our balcony till dawn, going through my grandmother's writings by the light of a little lamp, taking notes, and occasionally exclaiming at insights that exactly matched current study findings. Connections she'd drawn 50 years before modern studies proved them. The next week, I held an emergency meeting for our product development team. We need to refocus our formulations, I said, distributing printouts of crucial journal articles across the meeting table. These were my grandmother's original procedures. They are the foundation on which everything else should be built. By the end of the morning, we had laid out a new product strategy. Our Director of Research and Development, Dr. Asha Patel, a Harvard-trained physician who had grown disillusioned with the limitations of conventional medicine, almost vibrated with enthusiasm. These combinations make perfect sense from both biochemical and traditional perspectives, she remarked, looking over May's notes. Your grandmother was decades ahead of her time. The modified items were released 2 months later. Customer reaction was instant and overwhelmingly good. Users claimed more pronounced benefits, greater results, and less adverse effects. Our industry-leading retention rate increased even more. The next month, our subscription count surpassed 180,000. We introduced our adaptogenic mixes, extended our telemedicine services, and began preparing for worldwide delivery. 3 additional billboards emerged in significant areas, and AITA signed agreements with 2 hospital systems interested in complementary treatment options. I met my folks for coffee, as promised. The talk flowed more smoothly than over lunch, although it was careful to avoid more serious emotional issues. They inquired about current developments involving AITA. I inquired about their life, friendships, and garden. We did not mention Lily. As we were leaving, Mom handed me a tiny surprise wrapped in wrapping paper. What is this? I inquired, hesitant to take it. It's the bracelet your grandmother gave me when I married your father, she told me. I thought you might like to have it. For the connection to her. I opened it carefully. A beautiful jade bracelet with silver inlay, simple and lovely. She would have been so proud of you, Mom said quietly. She always said you had her spirit. I slid the bracelet onto my wrist, startled by its flawless fit. Thank you. Will you consider meeting Lily? Dad inquired as we approached the door. She's constantly asking about you. She says she misses her sister. The question elicited complex feelings. Lily had been educated to expect preference, but she had not initiated the dynamic between us. We had both been molded by our parents' decisions. Not yet, I responded, but maybe someday. Walking back to the office, I thought about the weird trip that had taken me here. My genuine life began with the wedding that my family did not attend. The anguish of their absence had driven me towards independence. I might not have claimed differently. The billboard they had seen by accident was more than simply a marketing campaign. It was a visual representation of everything I had accomplished during their absence. Their surprise at seeing my accomplishment shown so openly seemed appropriate. A reversal of our previous relationship, in which I was usually the one looking up to them, seeking recognition. I felt the jade bracelet on my wrist, remembering my grandmother's writings and her belief in circle healing. Perhaps this was its own form of medicine, the patient, meticulous rebuilding of a fundamentally damaged relationship, this time with new terms and bounds. That evening, I made a notation in my strategy plan for AITA's next stage of growth. Expand the community outreach program to incorporate family wellness programs. Investigate intergenerational ways to repairing family structures. Ethan spotted it later, while he was studying the manuscript. New direction? He asked. Not exactly, I said, recalling my parents, Lily, and the intricate tapestry of pain and hope that shaped our past. Just combining all aspects of the journey. Isn't that what holistic actually means? Nothing is wasted, everything is transformed. He grasped my hand. From rejected wedding invitation to industry disruptor. Quite a transformation. The best revenge isn't cutting people off, I said, fully comprehending what I was saying as I spoke. It's becoming so thoroughly you that they're forced to realize what they've missed. Not to injure them, but to finally be noticed. The next week, we verified the placements for 3 more billboards. One would stand in my parents' neighborhood, not as a message or a memory, but because the demographics were appropriate for our intended audience. This time they wouldn't be surprised to see my face over the roadway.